ICT policy and regulation. It's a pleasure to have everyone back. I hope that we'll use this final day for the appropriate networking, connections, and collaborations as we close off on this session. We have already laid quite a strong foundation and examined core and critical pressing issues around digital inclusion, cybersecurity, policy alignment, the WSIS Plus 20 review process, and the energy in the room and online has been electrifying. I just want to take a moment to draw attention to the fact that the Internet Society chapter of South Africa is one of the core partners, and what they're assisting with today is in hosting remote participation. So there are 5 cities that are online today present with us. We've got about 150 people outside of this room who are taking part within the remote hubs, and a further audience online. It really is quite a critical engagement towards shaping narrative and discourse around key and pressing challenges. We hope to take today to build the momentum and end on a spark, to end on an exciting note with relevance and actionable next steps that we can take into our institutions, into our daily operations, into our homes, and into our communities in the way of multi-stakeholder governance models, and explore how topics that are relevant today actually impact us on our daily life. I had a wonderful conversation with a group of young people who were struggling to contextualize how the topics we discuss are actually relevant in day-to-day issues. And the question I posed is, with everything that you've studied, and now you've studied for these exams and you've written essays on the topic of DPI, what does it mean to you? And that workshop proved very fruitful. So I hope that today's engagements will provide that kind of fruitful collaboration in day-to-day understanding of the critical role and perspective of these. And I hope that the discussions we have will be both applicable and transferable. So with this in mind, and to highlight the innovation from our youth today, I would also like to take a moment to welcome the audience to participate in conversation, and not just have conversation, but to challenge policy. This is all about people. We are people-led, and we want to ensure that no one is left behind within the digital age. So with that, let's continue to engage with purpose, listen actively, and contribute meaningfully. As we begin this day 2 of the ZAIGF, and with the background that we have now, I think it's the first panel is going to serve us well, which is understanding South Africa's role and perspective. How does internet governance fit into the National Development Plan? And with that, I'm going to invite the chairperson of the South African Internet Governance Forum to come to the stage, Ms. Lati Tlaka, who will be the moderator of today's session. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Program Director, and welcome everyone. We made it to day 3. I'll be okay. I think I'll be short now but I would like maybe my panelists to join me on stage. So the title of our session today is Internet Governance in South Africa's National Development Plan. And in this session, we seek to explore and identify actionable strategies through which internet governance in South Africa can be strengthened, reformed, and democratized in order to accelerate progress on the NDP 2030 focus areas. So I'd like to welcome on stage, I've got 2 panelists that will be joining online. I'd like to welcome Mr. Thabang Nkuma. He is the Technical Advisor for 4IR at MICT CETA. I would like to also welcome Prof. Nelan Naika. He is a lecturer at Durban University of Technology. I would also like to welcome Dr. Prinavan Govender. He is a lecturer at Durban University of Technology. And then online, I'm not sure if they are on now, but we'll be joined by Ms. Shamira Ahmed, the Executive Director of Data Economy Policy Hub, yes, Deb Hub. Are you there, ma'am? Do we have her online? Not yet. Okay. And then we've also got Dr. Makaziwe Makamba. She's a researcher at the National School of Government. Do we have her online?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, colleagues.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to take a seat and then we can start with our panel discussion. Thank you, colleagues. I think I'm just going to start with an opening question, and that's to you, Mr. Mkuma. Please just open up the floor for us by introducing yourself and advising, in your experience, what does internet governance mean in the context of South Africa's national development goals?
Thank you very much, Ms. Lati. So my name is Thabang Mkuma. I'm the technical advisor for 4IR at the MICT CETA, as I was introduced. So as my role, you would pick up, I come from the MICT CETA within the 4IR department, where we are a division that is mandated to lead on skills development initiatives around 4IR, in a sense. And my understanding, or at least even my experience in the work that I do around 4IR, in the context of internet governance and how it links as well to the NDP, relates specifically in chapter 9 of the NDP, which speaks about improving education, training, or if you like, skills development initiatives, and ensuring that we foster innovation in a sense. So you would understand that the internet governance would ask, or at least for some institutions and policies that will help us build an inclusive and developmental state, which also can be tracked as well in the NDP in a sense. So in the work that I do, we are mandated to ensure that the skills that we develop, right, actually respond to the current era in a sense, but also ensure that, if I can use the minister's words yesterday, to ensure that we have an inclusive and developmental internet society in a sense. And how then do we foster inclusion, and how then do we develop programs, education programs that are actually relevant to the current era, but also address, if you can, Chairperson, another goal in the NDP, which speaks about unemployment and economic development in a sense, because as a country, we face the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and if you like, to a greater extent, inequality in a sense. And the only way that we can address these kind of issues is ensuring that, one, we create or skill young people to be equipped with the jobs, or the skills that are required, or that could present them with opportunities to become employed, but also be able to become entrepreneurs as well, in a sense. So those are some of the initiatives that we as the MICT CETA have actually fostered and championed in ensuring that, one, we develop educational programs rather, that actually are relevant in this current industrial era. And when we speak about the education element, we speak about the development of 4IR qualifications that are actually responsive to the current industrial era that we find ourselves. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, it's also important that we as the MICT CETA, we've adopted a very a unique approach, in a sense that we don't skill just for the sake of skilling. we are now skilling young people to actually be digital entrepreneurs. Also, we skill to innovate, because innovation also creates a platform where young people can actually become digital entrepreneurs and then perhaps try and deal with these issues, these triple challenges of unemployment, inequality, as well as poverty in a sense. So that is just in a summary what I do in the context of the NDP, specifically chapter 9 as well as chapter 3 of the NDP, and how then do we then integrate good internet governance, which speaks about policy and institutions, and in this case would be the MICT-SETA, to ensure that we promote equitable and sustainable development, and also to a greater extent a developmental and inclusive society where all benefit. And as the chairperson Uluvo had indicated, that in the spirit of this conference, that we ensure that we don't leave anybody behind. It's important that we create inclusive mechanisms so that everybody can participate. So thank you.
Noted. Thank you, sir. I think this is going to be a very tough panel, but we do have limited time, so I'll be cognizant of that. But I've got maybe contributors in the education space on my panel. And now what we saw developing is the issue of connectivity, where the DM did mention that without connectivity, how do we even talk about access? How do we even talk about internet governance within the education space? So I will try to lead the conversation there, but I do like that, Prof, you are versatile when it comes to this, and I think we'll have a very interesting discussion as all panelists and the moderator. But let's try to talk about the issue of connectivity, where NDP calls for a national affordable broadband plan reaching at least 90% of the population by 2020. And we have missed that broadband target. So should we be looking at alternatives where digital rollouts are concerned? Should they be led by maybe community-owned networks, enforced open access to existing infrastructure, or public-private 4IR infrastructure funds? How is the model like? How should it look like? And please just introduce yourself in that.
Okay. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Prof. Naika from the Department of Information Systems at Durban University of Technology. So, I'm going to just speak to the aspect of connectivity. So we all know that, the NDP focuses on poverty, focuses on education, and focuses on employability. So I think the NDP emphasizes connectivity. The NDP emphasizes digital transformation to eradicate poverty, to improve, the quality of education, and to increase employment. The NDP, in order to do that, must be supported by very, very good governance and very good laws. In South Africa, we have good laws. So we have the cybercrime, the Prevention of Cybercrime Law of 2020, where it governs and mitigates, against cybercrimes. We have the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act that covers our data, covers our SMSs, covers our emails. We have the POPIA Act, okay, that is there for personal protection of people's identities. And then we have other laws like, Copyright Acts of 1998, and we have laws for trademarks. So internet, the NDP promote access to the internet, okay? So in order to have access to the internet, there must be connectivity. So you'll find that South Africa millions of South Africans need access to the internet to basically generate, digital literacy and stuff like that from the internet. So you'll find that in South Africa, we started this journey a long time ago. In 2013, there was a project called the SA Connect project, and we had 970 government entities that was connected through, I think, 8 different rural areas. And we're falling short, Lati, as you explained, in terms of the 100% connectivity that is required in 2030. And the issue is how do we achieve that kind of connectivity? So if you look at the private companies like Telkom, Vodacom, Afrios, they have their own lines, they have their own broadband lines. But remember, connectivity comes at a cost for the client, right? So our population is not able to afford that kind of fees. And also infrastructure, sometimes private companies do not go deep into rural areas. So the infrastructure is also a problem. So I would definitely advocate open access to broadband infrastructure, where we allow multiple service providers to utilize the same physical network, like the fiber optic cables and wireless access points. I think connectivity will definitely go much faster. And then you're talking about the P partnerships of 4IR infrastructure, trying to get 4IR infrastructure through the P partnerships, that's your private-public partnerships. Now, remember that we are a country where there's a lot of mismanagement of funds. There's a lot of corruption in terms of, who gets contracts and which private companies are onboarded with government entities. So there should be a lot of regulation and policy that are governing that. But I think it would be excellent. So currently there's one very, very strong one, which is BBI Infraco and Santec, working with CETA, which is government information technology agency. So they are connecting, but uptake is slow, and we need more and more of those partnerships. Thank you.
Okay, so we're talking about connectivity, but I just want to remind us also that the NDP does call for it to be affordable. So I think that question would be to Dr. Magamba online. What is your take on South Africa having the highest data costs per gigabyte in Africa? Should zero rating for public benefit platforms be mandatory? And what categories of services are we looking at, where we've got health, education, we've got agriculture? So what's your take on prioritizing zero rating, Doctor?
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Please do confirm if you can hear me from your side.
Doc, you on mute.
I'm unmuted from my side. Can you hear me? Chair?
Doc,
All right,
I don't know
so
if you can hear me, but I'm getting indications that your mic.
we can hear her online. Okay, I think, all right. I think online they can hear me. I'm not sure if you can on your side. Chairperson?
Yes, now. Thank you. Please
All right.
proceed.
All right, thank you so much, Chairperson, and good afternoon. Oh, still the morning. Good morning, colleagues. Apologies, I couldn't come and join you down there due to unforeseen circumstances. But thank you so much for inviting me in this pivotal topic today to discuss about the digital transformation, the role of South African internet governance, and also in aligning with NDP, and what is it that we need to do in order to actually execute the mandate effectively. You've mentioned, Chair, that we have missed the target of 2020. I think we need to go back as we talk about the digital transformation. We need to go back into the basics. That why did we miss that? What are the problems that we need to address on that? If there are any problems, what are the mitigation plans? How do we move forward on that? So when we look at that, you also look at the fragmentation of the infrastructure, and you would also notice that so many areas, they are not connected, as we have other colleagues have mentioned that there's no internet connectivity. And when there is no internet connectivity, Chair, you would notice that the innovation then becomes lagging. So if we want to move on with the digital transformation and ensure that the country is inclusive, we need to ensure everyone is connected. We need accessible and affordable internet connectivity so that we can enable people to learn. Then in that case, we are promoting digital inclusion, not only promoting digital inclusion, but also we are enabling people to be innovative in the different areas they are in. So this is not just a topic about when are we connecting, is it necessary to connect, but it's more about driving the innovation forward. And zero rating, it is indeed very essential, especially in the education and healthcare sector, because people, they need to learn. People, they need to see how to develop applications that are suitable for their needs. So they will only be able to do that when they learn more. So thus we're saying that zero rating is quite imperative so that people can be able to learn, and also connectivity is essential. So the DUT now, if they really want to actually align with the NDP, we need to ensure that the component of promoting inclusivity is quite key, and also going with the skills development as well. We need to check what are the skills that we have. What are the cybersecurity skills that we really need? Are we having enough? Do we need to have enough training? Do we need to create awareness programs? And also comes to the partnership as well. Good governance when it comes to the digital space is not merely about adopting these technologies, but it's more about being intentional and strategic about investing in the digital technology, and also being transparent, committed, and know when do we collaborate, what is our the engagement do we need to put in place, and also monitor and evaluate, because we can put all those things that we want, but if we don't have the measures and check the impact assessment that we need to check, and check what are the deliverables, are we really ticking the boxes, or are we having the impact in the society? This will be the futile exercise, and everyone needs to understand that it's not just a mere about the talk about digital transformation, but it's a mandate, it's a necessity for the citizens to be connected and ensure that we promote inclusivity, and in order for us to drive socio-economic development of the country and improve the country economic development going forward. Let me pause it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. I think when we come back to the issue of connectivity, and I think I've noted that you mentioned that zero rating is important and that people need to learn. But let's go back to the issue of connectivity, and I'll give this to Dr. Govind, and also please just introduce yourself in answering the question. But let's talk about connectivity and rural schools. What happens when they go offline? How can we ensure equity when it comes to that? Where we're talking about zero rating in education, we're talking about connectivity, but what happens when they go offline? How do we ensure equity? And what governance reforms are needed to make offline open source technology part of the national curriculum delivery?
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you very much for the question. My name is Dr. Pranavan Gavanda, and I'm a lecturer / academic / researcher at the Durban University of Technology, a faculty of Accounting and Informatics, Information Systems. So my passion is research in AI, e-learning, computer programming, and micro-credentials. And I think this question that you've raised with regard to rural schools going offline, I think first and foremost, there should not be a situation where it should go offline. I feel that we need to reach this goal of 100% connectivity throughout South Africa. I think presently the statistics is around about 74%. As an academic, that's not a distinction in terms of penetration of the and connectivity. But let's just say that it does go offline. You know, we have a situation where schools, educational institutions are offline. What should we do? And I think our program director spoke about it this morning, that there's hubs throughout South Africa. There's the Soweto hub where communities have gathered so that they can join us online. And I think that's an alternative for us to do, where we have these centers of excellence, if I could call it, or hubs in rural areas where people that are sitting at home, there's an issue with connectivity. Here, let's go 5-6 Ks away to join a community hub. It would have been great if you could have all participants sitting at home in a rural area throughout South Africa being able to join us. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. We could also go for something like partnering with the NGOs as well, where they can get on board, and the plan C or the plan D in terms of assisting rural areas to get back online. We could have preloaded educational tablets or your laptop for that matter, where programs, you call it low code, no code, where you don't necessarily have to be connected to the internet. I know as a lecturer and academic at DUT, I'm very fortunate in that I lecture and I teach with the internet, with the Wi-Fi. And if I don't have Wi-Fi, I just don't know what to do, because that's how it is. And at that point as well, we would train or retrain educators and teachers to ensure that they have this backup plan. So my backup plan would be I have my cell phone data and I'm able to access it. But if I don't have network coverage, then it's useless, right? So teachers need to be retrained in the hybrid model of, you have Wi-Fi connectivity, no Wi-Fi connectivity. We could even get on board, your printed materials. So here I have my printed copy of my, intro. If my laptop has to go down, if I don't have power, well, if no power, there's no connectivity. We could go for printed material in terms of having textbooks printed. We could have go back to the face-to-face libraries, and I also feel that the Department of Education should come on board and stipulate that a school that has low connectivity or no connectivity should partner with a university that has this the capability. So let's say, for instance, DUT partners with a school in KwaMashu or Umlazi, a rural area. And now we share our expertise and infrastructure. So we could even get ICASA on board. They can say, hey, let's low cost this area because of the infrastructure. We could employ satellite communication. We can employ Wi-Fi, microcommunication, microsatellite, stuff like that ensures that we are connected to and give everybody an equal opportunity. Because trust me, the way the world is going, we have to be connected. We cannot sit back and say, no, we're going to allow, we're okay with the 75, 80% penetration of internet to throw. So I hope that answers the question and it opens it up for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, it does answer the question. And I think what I got from everything that you mentioned is that it goes back to planning. It goes back to partnerships, where you mentioned that teachers need to be trained in a hybrid model of maybe coordinating. And I think what we need to highlight is that we are more reactive and not proactive. So we need to change that when it comes to our planning. And I think the next question is to you, Mr. Mkuma. What is the status of curriculum development under CAPS? Does it include platform literacy, AI risk awareness, and content verification? Like, do we have that where the NDP does speak about the internet when it comes to education? So do we have that? What is the status and who is leading these programs?
Okay, yeah, there are actually initiatives or programs that aim to perhaps move the curriculum towards the current needs or even growing demands from a skills perspective. So from a DBE point of view, right, because there's many layers to this. There's the Department of Basic Education, Department of higher education, and perhaps at the CETA level, that's where we would actually deal with developing curriculum or programs that are responsive towards industry needs in a sense. I'll just speak about the DBE at that level. So DBE, there is some progress that has been done in terms of introducing robotics and coding programs in a sense, but the implementation thereof, if we're really being honest, hasn't been to the satisfactory level at which we actually would want it to be. At a higher education level, we know the curriculum reform process is quite lengthy in its nature. Just changing introducing a qualification requires many stakeholders to be involved. As it stands, DUT, I think, is the only institution that offers Internet of Things as part of its curriculum in a sense. And you get other universities that are still lagging behind. They're just offering us the traditional computer science degrees that were offered back then by our uncles and all of that stuff. So so this is where the CETAs then come in terms of their function. Where we understand, because even yesterday I was at it's a good thing because it's something that I saw yesterday. Yesterday, I was monitoring a program here in one of our TVET colleges, and the curriculum that they are doing is outdated. It's really outdated to a certain extent, where they even have an IT background, but they have no clue of what machine learning is, Internet of Things is. So they really need to start from a foundational basis, and that prior knowledge serves them nothing in the sense, because it's as if it's as if they're starting from a novel stage in a sense. So we as the CETAs have then come in to introduce, as I indicated, occupational qualifications, which would then be translated or at least implemented in these TVET colleges to ensure that we then bridge that gap that exists as far as the curriculum is concerned, in a sense, because you would understand that TVET colleges, as it stands, would be phasing out the native programs and start implementing occupational qualifications, in a sense. So at those different levels and phases of the curriculum development, this is where we are as a country, but more work still needs to be done because we find ourselves in a very fast-changing and dynamic environment where what is relevant now, tomorrow, or sometime in a few years' time is no longer relevant. So which requires that agility, in a sense, to introduce these kind of short programs in universities. I've seen universities have also started introducing short programs because of the curriculum reform process that is quite lengthy, in a sense. But yeah, if we're really being honest, and I'm going to answer your question very simply, yes, there's work at different levels of the education sector, but not much has been done. And this is where the multi-sector approach or collaboration is required.
Okay, thank you. And I think we just need to maybe give DUT a round of applause, because he did mention that DUT is the only institution offering IoT. Oh,
Right.
okay. It's Africa, not only in South Africa. I think it leads me to my next question, and it's to you, Prof. With that said, and us finding ourselves in a fast-changing environment, how do we regulate AI tools in education to prevent bias, misinformation, and digital exclusion? And how do we ensure online learning platforms are accurate and inclusive?
Okay, thanks, Lati, for your question. I think it's a very important question to answer. I think the NDP, we all have to understand, it promotes digital literacy. So, IT has evolved now beyond digital literacy. So we've now gone into AI, and kids are, using AI tools. So obviously, we need regulation in terms of that. We need to make sure that our students are not going into the deep web and the dark web and, getting engaged in activities there. Okay, so it's very important for students to be educated. So I think first and foremost, I need to say is that there's no international body governing the use of AI. We don't have a watchdog. And people are using AI to the detriment of humanity. A good example of it is AI is used a lot in terms of war. So I think we need international body to govern AI. So international body can inform educational institutions in terms of basically, what they should be doing and what they should be watching out for. So I think that's very important. And I think South African Internet Governance Forum should be, actively seeking that in terms of through international bodies. I think it's important as a country that we look at creating our own policies and ethical standards in the absence of any international policy. So higher education institutions and basic education institutions should look at policy in terms of the use of AI, in terms of the use of apps. We should have, people in higher education vetting these apps and maybe enforcing ethical behavior through policy. So, we need to look at that very actively. Another important thing that we should be doing is fact-checking. So we should fact-check, sources that students use. So as educators and academics, it's important to ensure that our students are using credible sources when they are doing their referencing. So fact-checking is very important. And also help our students to critically evaluate the content that they are using on the internet. Help them to be able to identify, what's a deep fake. They must be able to do that kind of thing. And the last thing is, I think institutions should look at AI verification tools. So schools should have a list of tools that they can use to verify if something was AI generated or not, so that there won't be any issues about students getting credit for things that they didn't do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think I've noted two things where you sort of tapped into awareness. You've also tapped into regulation, taking us back to the multi-stakeholder involvement and internet governance. So maybe if I can just pose a question to you, Dr. Magamba, how can South Africa's internet governance ecosystem be reimagined to more intentionally and effectively drive the achievement of the country's National Development Plan 2030 goals?
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, in order for us to succeed on that, it is through our public-private partnership. It is through the strategic investment and the policies and regulations that we need to create as a country. However, as you have mentioned, that we tend to be more passive, not to be active, and also trying to catch up. But it is time for us to do trials and errors, to test what is it that we can do. Does it work? Let's not be afraid of failing forward, but to try to test it, to check what is everything that is happening inside the country. So government itself and also with their private partners, they need to collaborate together with the communities as well to say, what are the things that we need to develop? What are the major aspects that will drive the country forward? How do we enable the fast forward and localization of the application that needs to be used? The Prof just spoke about the importance of ensuring that there is a localization. We would notice, Chairperson, that when it comes to the localization of African use, especially in this technology, specifically on the AI, it's rare to find an accent that is more African. You would struggle to find that. However, it shows that we are not more proactive enough to say, let's train how to use these technologies. What are the needs that we need to actually put in terms of the involvement? So we need to check the nitty-gritties. Thus, as government, we don't need only to speak about policy development and so forth, but we need to check the inclusivity. We need to change the models of delivery. Now, you would notice that previously there was the suit of actually taking the courses, but now we don't need those. We need the tailor-made courses. First, at the National School of Government, what we normally do, we do the webinars for the awareness and also the master classes so that we expose people across the different spectrum of technology and also the digital transformation in terms of what are the components of the digital transformation, what is it that we need to understand about that. And also if we want to reach a stage where we are actually a global competitive, what are the niche areas? What are our pain points? So we need to actually gather the information collectively and also understand not only from one aspect, but sitting together, collaborate and also discuss, and not only discussing, but also implement and understand that technology won't wait for us. Other people are really doing the work while we are still trying to develop the policies. Now it's a matter of how do we make sure that we develop while we're making sure that the policies actually are there as well to guide the ethical use of those technologies. So I think to summarize, Chairperson, in that we need an inclusive society. We need a digital literate society because we won't be able to run forward if we are still having a digital divide. So we need to address those components and ensure that we move together collaboratively and no one is left behind. With that will be made through a digital literacy and then ensuring that we educate people about the technologies across the different spectrum and leave no one behind. Let me pause this in there, Chair.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We need an inclusive society. And you have also mentioned the issue of collaboration and collective participation. I like that. And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Govender, to please just help me close before we open up for questions. If your institution could lead one internet governance policy reform in 2025, what would it be?
That's an easy question to answer because I would like zero-rated data costs for our institution and all .ac.za websites, right? But I'd also like to extend that to healthcare as well, where you have this thing of online telemedicine that should be also zero-rated. I also feel that government and social services should be zero-rated, where our citizens can log on to a website where they can apply for their social grants or passports that we're talking about and identity documents and not have the long queues at Home Affairs, so that now they are not, well, firstly, they would be poor in terms of not being able to access it through transportation means, but now they have a site that's zero-rated. You don't pay for anything. And I think this is where the private sector, MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, Telkom can get on board and say, okay, this is our community engagement, our involvement for our poorest of the poor. Let's zero-rate that. So I would love it if our university, I know my dean would be listening as well, and my HOD, that we could implement and try to go ahead with having a zero-rated policy for .ac.za, .gov, our social services for that matter. Thank you for the nod.
Thank you so much. I don't know, do we have any questions from the floor? Can we have a roaming mic? Thank you.
Hello. Hi. My question is to Prof, who was talking about education system. I'm going to make a statement before it's for you. Yeah, I'm going to make a statement before I ask the question, but my thing is the education system is the same as policy. They are behind what's happening in the tech space. So when we talk about AI, we say, oh, we have to verify they wrote the paper themselves. We can't give students credit for what AI wrote. The reality is nothing doesn't come from AI. Nothing, really. Textbooks are behind, and in the next coming 10 years, we will be writing with AI. So why delay the process by the education system that's filtering and reiterating the same thing over and over? I just don't understand why students are being penalized for using AI. Until somebody explain it to me, I'll understand it better.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question, and I think we in higher education, I think we kind of grappling with that question. I think our education has progressed a lot more further in terms of the internet and connectivity as compared to basic education. Our students have access to internet 24/7 when they are on campus, and we provide more opportunities for them to be connected, and some of them even get devices to be connected. So you'll find that we are not saying that AI should not be used in education, but we're saying that it should be moderated. So remember that you need AI to give you ideas. So if you're given an assignment, you can get your ideas from AI. But you can't expect AI to author that assignment for you. So we're saying use AI as a support tool, but it should not be the one that's doing the assignment for you. So we are not at university discouraging the use of AI. We are actually encouraging the use of AI. An AI tool cannot write a doctoral thesis for you. An AI tool can never do that for you. So you still, have to use your analytical skills, use your synthesis skills to be able to write thesis. But it's there to support you. It's there to, yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. We've got one more question on the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. My question is to MI-SETA. Just a context, I'm from a rural area called Umzimkhulu here in KZN. And the first time I saw a computer, it was when I enrolled here at DUT. And now I'm in the cybersecurity space. And I'm looking at the current situation still in my area where kids just don't have connectivity and they don't have access to these. So what are the programs that you do in the rural areas for those who are in school and those who are out of school? And who do you collaborate with in that space? Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question behind you. I don't know if you want to pass the mic, and then let's couple the two, and then we'll get a response from the panel.
Thank you. I do love the question about, sorry, my name is Dr. Buthelezi from the Moses Kotane Institute. I do love the question, why are we not using AI? As an academic in my former life, I think a part of me is like, we can't, because we still want them to learn how to write, because writing is one of the critical skills that a human being must possess. So it is imperative that whatever technology comes into play, we use it sparingly, also taking into account the amount of work that still needs to go in. Can you imagine getting a PhD who can't write a thesis? Can you imagine getting a PhD who can't write a publication? Then it means we would have failed the younger generation that is coming after us. I mean, when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor used to look at my chapters and you can do so much better than this, without even reading, because he knows that it's a skill that you need to cultivate. And once you have acquired that skill, then you have it for life. You can even write a book, you can write whatever that you want to write. Be that as it may, my question was more on the fact that what are we doing as the country to address the issue of the fact that some of the rural areas in our communities are still stuck in the second industrial revolution? And we are busy here talking about AI this, AI that. Yet when you go to Bergville, for an example, or when you go to Jozini, you'll find that there are families that still don't have electricity, something that is a basic necessity. Yet those people are being left behind, and we are moving along with the times. We are in the 5th industrial revolution, and they are stuck in the 2nd revolution, and no one is talking about them. So when you go there and you say, do you know about industrial revolution? They wouldn't even understand what you're talking about. And even the kids that are growing in that environment are then disadvantaged in terms of participating in this fast track technology advanced era that we are in. So that is what I would like us to address. Before we even talk about rolling out robotics in school and AI, let's start where we come from in rural areas and make changes there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, for the comment and the question. I'm going to give both questions because of their similarities to Mr. Mkuma. Sure. I would like, wait, I think, can we let Mr. Mkuma go first? Is there a question online?
Yes. Yeah, Kanobu. Yes,
okay,
yes.
For the purpose of time, colleagues, can we engage outside also? I just want to give to Mr. Mkuma to maybe just respond to the 2 questions, and then he'll help us with wrapping up and closing the session. And then if we can engage outside. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yes, can you hear me?
Can we proceed?
Okay, sure. I will just answer this question in the quickest form and fashion. So we, as the MICT have 2 strategies, right? Integrated digital skills strategy and a rural development strategy. And the integrated digital skills strategy actually laments or even emphasizes the need to ensure that be biased in our rollout towards rural and township areas, where we skill people who are actually in the periphery areas and equip them with 4IR and digital skills in a sense. So that's what the integrated digital skills strategy, or the IDSS, emphasizes. But also we've ensured that our rollout of programs is biased, and we roll out those programs in those rural areas and even in township areas where young people would not even know what the fourth industrial revolution is, to a certain extent. While our scope actually limits us in terms of, we are institutions of Department of Education, so in the post-school education training sector. So it's after matric. But our IDSS that I've actually just cited now actually makes recognition that it's important that we skill young people from level up until post-school level in a sense. So we then work with other partners such as DBE and other institutions that are within that space to ensure that we skill young people to actually be able to get those skills, but also work with other institutions that have the capacity or the mandate to ensure that there's infrastructure to ensure that they're connected, because our mandate is to skill and also provide opportunities for innovation and employment in a sense. But that's how we then collaborate with other institutions to ensure that nobody is left behind, because in this current era that we find ourselves, it's a digital era, and nobody can actually be able to participate in this digital era if they don't have the skills, in a sense, which creates that exclusion, in a sense, which is why we've really been biased to the youth, one, but also youth in township and rural areas to ensure that nobody's left behind.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mkuma. And colleagues, I wish we had more than just 45 minutes, but we do have an allocation of 45 minutes. And if there are any questions online, can we also just utilize the chat bot as the chat to maybe just ask those, and then also maybe during the tea break. But I do know that we've got sessions that are similar to this, and we can utilize that to ask questions even within the audience. Let's engage, colleagues, let's network. But I'd like us to maybe just give my panelists a round of applause as we leave this.
Just one nugget from my side, if I can, since I won't be able to communicate with the colleagues.
Thank you very much for that panel. And I think we'll all agree that these are quite pertinent issues. The conversation of how we learn and whether it is still relevant, I think came up quite considerably. And as well as that, the various mechanisms, but the realities of what South Africa actually looks like, and how long we're going to accept it, and how that actually may be entrenching our society even further, bridging a greater digital divide than there needs to be. I'm very excited for us to get on to, firstly, to continue this conversation. We will have a rollover of questions, as the chairperson mentioned, from this panel into the next. So if you've still got points that you'd like to bring up, there is time to do so. And then we can move on to the next session. Our next panel is going to be on policy, innovation, and support for internet resilience and operations. I just want to introduce our moderator to come up for this panel, who is Tshepiso Khadebe. And she's going to be the one who will introduce her panelists. So Ms. Tshepiso, are you here? I'm not seeing you in the room. Can you please ask Tsolo where? I think we might have an online moderator for this one, so we might need some tech support. If you can just bear with us.
Chairperson? Chairperson, can you hear me from your side? Okay.
Colleagues, there's some technical coordination that needs to happen. So what we're going to do is move the tea break up and I'll come back to the session in 15 minutes. Thank you.
When I put something down, there was something the cameras out of this. And it's always really good when it's yeah. So that's why they couldn't run it. Yeah. Because I think that every incident to apply. But the best for work, but my shoe says that now. Because even the guys is going to you want to tell them. And I'm like, hey, jobs are not the same. I will say that next. Yeah, it's right. It's a 1-2. It's four. Is the full life? What for questions and see? That's the life force. That's the last one. One for us. It's fine. Because I thought you wanted the question which I asked most of them. It's okay to stop asking questions. That's even yeah. Because I saw this in two. Because even now that when you pay anything, put it one thing. This is a tool. Yes, time. Yes, for. So not only them up with yes for. Because when you might get a number say it's for them. I want to last. Ready for
I'm so sorry, the moderator and people online are just not coordinated. So we're gonna come back to that session. Okay.
Who understands sound like feeling
Yeah, I was like. Yes, so you can see that. I think this is here, we can also involve and so I can attractive species, so that's and I think that technical team is setting out and realizing also that they need to that time. But then the notification. Yes, so you're the speaker. No, I actually going to say.
That's okay.
Hey, I'm also going to finish it. Then you'll just deal with that. The kind of she's going to I always go have because it's yeah.
I'm sorry.
How much time do you think about such as that? How do you math I was right away from outside. So I was thinking of how to do it outside. Okay, I think we can start. I just got full line. I think people are very changed. So that was the time. So for now, get everybody connected to the last round and then system here. Yeah. And also it's so higher, so this doesn't matter. No, when it goes higher. Now all these going to be so you have to use only and then when I also okay. Right. Yeah, Yes, but the other one just came down to this. So they need to find your
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Now we can hear you. I can't hear you guys via the computer. Okay, there you go.
She hear us. She can hear us.
Okay, so you can hear us.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The other speaker just exited the room. You've got a speaker who just exited the room now. There. Luisa. Luisa's here on the call. Go get him. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome back to this day 2. After the technical difficulties, I think the pandemic and the quarantine really taught us all to be quite agile to the way the world is evolving in terms of work and processes. So for our next panel, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. We decided to go with our expert participation, but to take it in a hybrid format. And so we'll have our moderator, Tshepiso Hadebe, joining us online. We'll have our panelists, both online and in person, taking part in this hybrid session. Right now, we're moving on to the panel discussion on bridging policy and practice, internet governance for all. We've got a multi-stakeholder panel sitting with us currently. And the reason for this is because we valued the diverse participation and opinions of the different speakers that are going to be coming in, but then also because we wanted to highlight the ways that the narrative of policy itself is so nuanced, and then the way that the implementation of that policy is so nuanced. I think for this one, we're going to have a much more broader speaking and question and answer session afterwards. And I think the encouragement is to bring in the questions from the previous session. So we'll do about 20 minutes of question and answer and then move on to the next panel. We'll do 45 minutes of this panel. And so if you've got questions online to our online participants, please do send in your questions through the chat. We'll be looking out for them and we will answer those questions as well. If there's a specific question to a specific speaker or contributor on the floor, please do mention that. Otherwise, we will get around to all the questions. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Tshepiso Khadebe, who's going to be speaking on the panel today with Mr. Loyiso Jira, Sandile Nene, Sipho Ngobeni, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, ma'am, because this is a very important conversation, and I think it's one that you lead without haste. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for such a wonderful introduction. And I do apologize for the technical difficulties. I think it's a sign that I should have been there, and I do apologize that I wasn't able to make it in person. And thank you so much. Really, this is a session that I hope will be packed, that I hope people both online and in person will be able to take away a lot from, but also ask as many questions as they would like. Right, so this session is about bridging policy and practice and an internet governance for all. Really, the goal with this session is to explore the disconnect between internet governance policy formulation and its practical implementation, particularly concerning underrepresented groups. The discussion will aim to identify challenges, share examples of effective multi-stakeholder practices, and brainstorm strategies for creating more inclusive and impactful digital governance. We hope you take away, or what we hope to achieve with this session is really to underscore the importance of bridging the gap between internet governance policy and practice for a truly inclusive digital future for South Africa. We also hope to unpack some of the challenges, share practical examples, and explore pathways for greater alignment between policy and the lived realities of South African citizens. And we're also really today, we're looking forward to considering the diverse perspective and experiences from our esteemed panel. And please, with that, please allow me to introduce my panel for today. We have Mr. Loyiso Jira, sorry for mispronouncing that, who is the Managing Director of the ICT SME Chamber. We've got Professor Sizwe Snail, who is the founder and the Chief Executive of Snail Attorneys. We've got Mr. Ashraf Patel, who is a Senior Researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. We've got Mr. Sandile Nene, who is the ADDG for Media Policy Development, Market Modeling and Analysis at GCIS. We've got Mr. Ngobeni, who's a Senior Research at the Council of Scientific Research. And then we've got Mr. Thabiso Tsugani, who's a Performance Management Executive for the Universal Service and Access Agency of South Africa. If my panel is on side, they could please take the stage. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've just been updated that on my panel, we've only got Mr. Sandile Nene, Mr. Loyiso, and Mr. Thabiso Tsugani. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Well, we'll start with Mr. Sandile Nene. Just if you could introduce yourself and very just briefly share with us your perspective on what the most significant gaps you see between internet governance policy and practice in your respective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Maybe let me reintroduce myself. I am Sandile Nene. Obviously, I would also like to take the opportunity to break a bit that I work in the presidency now, but I'm also the interim CEO of an entity called Marketing, Advertising and Communication Sector Charter Council. But why am I raising that, colleagues, is that I think there are two things. The first is, if you were to go to all the cabinet submissions, it talks about the need for communications, or it is for any program, activity, as well as Yes. Programs, activities of government must be known. Now, and then if you look at the practice, typically we want to come up with a policy that is going to assist South Africans. What do? We then divide our province into 9. We come to Durban and say we've covered KZN. That's not what we've covered. That's not how you make policy. In instances where we do policy consultations, it would be all over weekends, but we are very selective in terms of the times. We usually go where there are no people who are going to challenge us. We go and we wait until all our colleagues who are unemployed can fill up the room, and then we start doing policy. So one of the pitfalls of our policy-making function has been that we come with an already assumed position of what we want people to do. And then people will then rubber stamp. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think if we were to challenge what the DM said to us 20 years later, if I were to go out and do a vox pop, ask the students, ask South Africans who are walking by, what do they understand to be the decisions that was taken in Geneva? Because remember, you need to inform for somebody to be empowered for economic development. So I think it remains the difficult task is that we seem not to be informing people, but we assume that whatever we are doing, it's on behalf of the citizens. So for me, that would be one of the critical things that we need to look at. That's.
Thank you so much for that. You touched on a very important aspect, particularly in South Africa, having our constitution that guarantees everyone the right to have a say in policies and laws that govern them, and just the importance of having inclusive policy processes, not just those that are concentrated in urban areas, but throughout South Africa to make sure that all citizens are included. Thank you so much for that. And we will now move on to our next speaker. Could please introduce yourself and just give us also your brief perspective on the most significant gaps you see.
My name is Loyiso Kira. Just also to just give the context of where also I sit, except for the ICT SMME chamber. I sit in a number of government boards, BBI, TIA as the chair, up until recently at MICT CETA, and I also sit in the council, the BICT Sector Council. So I have quite a fair view of what happens within the policy environment. And I think for me, this topic is particularly quite interesting because if we can solve what we are talking about today or in this panel, 90% of the problems that we faced in South Africa would be solved. Because as you would know, we are touted as having one of the best constitutions in the world. But does it serve our people? Some may argue not. We are also touted as having some of the most progressive policy and policy frameworks globally. But again, those tend to fall short. We're talking about a similar thing in one of the panels earlier, that we intended to have 90% internet access throughout the country, but that does not happen. You can look at all the policies starting from RDP. The intention is good. And it's even said, people will say, no, the ruling party is very good at putting policy. However, when it comes to implementation, there seems to be something failing. So, but for me, it's not an issue of just putting policy, because a good policy or a policy framework will also look at how it should be implemented. So as you are building that policy, you should be looking at, or maybe just to put it the other way, if you study systems thinking, it would tell you that linear solutions will tend to fail at implementation, because some of the things that we do are part of complex systems. And I think if as a government and all the stakeholders that are involved can really take systems thinking into what we do when we do, even from a policy formulation point of view that Mr. Nene was talking about, in that we would know that we need to have multi-stakeholder involvement when we co-create even that policy. Also, you will find the one department does something and the other department does the opposite. So even government on its own negates each other before you even get to other stakeholders, which would be your academia and. So for me, I think it's one of the critical things that as a government we need to solve in really bringing systems thinking and systems approach into both policy development and implementation. Even if you come to the issues of internet governance, there's a lot of things that we spoke about today here, but I can almost tell you now, most of the benefits that we're talking about are going to benefit only less than 20% or even less of our society. The rest will be left behind. And if we are not careful, the very same divide that we had, the economic divide, will simply be strengthened by digital divide if we don't address some of the issues that go into policy formulation. So for me, the biggest gap is really how do we look at a policy both from the initial engagements all the way to close out, the positive, negative feedback loops or mechanisms that happens in terms of continuous involvement, adaptation, to make sure that if the policy or the environment was changing. Earlier today, someone was saying, you will be late. Policy in this day and age needs to be adaptive, and it needs to be built into that policy that as things change, you are able to be adaptive enough to make sure that you move on with times. So I think as we are talking today, if we can solve this, South Africa will be completely in a different place.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Luis. What profound statements. I hear you and I completely agree with you in terms of sometimes fragmentation in efforts and what outcomes that can have in terms of policy making, but also the need, especially in the digital age we're in, the need to have very adaptive policies that can be adapted to new and emerging technologies is quite important. And with that being said, I will now hand over to Mr. Thabiso for him to introduce himself and also give us a brief overview.
Yep. Thanks, Program Director. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And let me first reintroduce myself. My name is Thabiso Tuani, and I'm the executive responsible for research and strategy at the Universal Service and Access Agency. And I must also put it out there that I haven't even finished my first 90 days. So before you, bring all the USASA sins on me, just pardon me on that. Now, maybe just by background, I've trained as an engineering technician by background. I have built networks right around the continent in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And I've also worked on policy with ministries and regulators also across the continent. So I've got a fair view of the technology aspect and also the policy aspect. And like I say, I've operated at the intersection of technology, policy, and market. Now, talking about bridging policy and practice when it comes to internet governance for all, I want to maybe talk about this topic in the context of the Universal Service Agency and its mandate. Now, Deputy Minister yesterday also made reference to the issue of the WISS, whereby 2 decades since the World Summit on Information Society, the digital landscape has evolved beyond imagination. However, the gap between internet governance, policy, and practical outcomes in South Africa, that gap remains significant. And that is a challenge that I think we're still grappling with now. And it's worth noting also that South Africa was among the early African adopters of the WISS Geneva and also the Tunis commitments, particularly around universal access, digital inclusion, and also multi-stakeholder governance. But the implementation, this is what we've been grappling with up to now. That has not kept to pace, because right now we only have about 76% of the population that is on the internet, and this is according to the ICASA 2023 ICT report. And the disparities on issues of quality, cost, and digital skills, those disparities persist. Now, with that, the implications now of internet governance on users are very significant, especially as the country assesses its progress in line with the WSIS plus 20 principles. So for us, these implications relate directly to policy alignment, institutional evolution, and also service delivery expectations under South Africa's digital transformation agenda. So now the question is with the USASA and its mandate, does the USASA mandate also find expression, or is it relevant also, to the WSIS, global norms and stuff? Well, if you look at the WSIS section line C2, for instance, it talks about ICT infrastructure, and the action line C4 talks about the capacity building. And those are issues that speak directly to the USASA statutory mandate to promote universal access and service. And also other institutions, your ITU, IGF, UN Broadband Commission, all of those institutions, they reinforce the USASA's role as a vehicle for inclusive digital development. Now, with that said, I think we can safely say the alignment with all these institutions and those policy imperatives that re-emphasizes or buttresses USASA's legitimacies and work, and also it justifies for us the increased investment in universal access initiatives. So with that in mind, we can clearly see that there is now, I think, a need for the institutional reform and also accountability. Why I'm saying that, I think we all would agree that internet governance discourse, it emphasizes issues such as transparency, multi-stakeholder participation, and also results-based delivery. DM yesterday spoke, I think, passionately about results-based management, whereby, sometimes we tend to focus on the inputs, the activities. We've put access there, we've built a site, we've connected, but what is the outcome? What is the impact of all of that? We need to measure all those things. And as USASA, I think we are increasingly expected to modernize also our operational model. Some of the things that we still do, or how we do them, I must admit they are cringeworthy, but we need to do, a relook at our open data platforms for transparency on the funded projects. We need also to put transparency around identifying the underserved communities, also digital performance monitoring tools that are aligned with the national and global benchmarks. So if we do that, then that can also maybe assist us towards becoming more, current and relevant in terms of how we do, our work. Now, in conclusion, I would like to say also that internet governance for us, it is no longer a peripheral concern as maybe it was, at some point. It is now central to our relevance, our legitimacy, and also the impact that we need to have on society. And as an agency, we are striving to become more, explicit, and also involving our work or putting global norms in our work, adapting our models also to the realities of the digital society, and on ensuring that we remain a credible champion of universal service and internet age and also digital inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tabi. So that was a very, very detailed and packed knowledge session. We will get back definitely to USASA, but now in the interest of time, I would like to hand over to Dr. Kirupile for a brief introduction and a brief overview as well.
Thank you. And first of all, apology. I joined the panel a little late. I was on a call with the DM, and in the interest of job security, I thought I should finish that call before I came here. That's what I did. So I've got the gist of the topic, and I'm going to try and maybe talk about legislative policy making, regulation making in this digital era. Just to say, my colleague Tabiso and I, we shared an office in our previous lives teaching regulation. So it's a topic I like. But I think policy making, legislation making, regulatory making is a fraught process at the best of time. And there's a natural contention between those who write policies and those who write regulations and those who have to enforce them, right? And that natural tension is necessary and required. But that process gets even more difficult when you look at digital, with the emerging digital technologies and emerging technologies and digital transformation. It's like, I'm old enough to have gone to a carnival or a circus where they had this game where you whack a mole. A mole comes up and you whack it and it moves over. So policy making in this kind of era is like a whack-a-mole process. You're trying to regulate something here and something moves along later. So what we need to start doing, and my colleague spoke about, siloed approach to legislative making. So what we need to start doing is we need to take evidence-based policy making, which is the basis of what we move forward, and start infusing it with other frameworks that makes it more flexible. Risk-based approach, outcomes-based approach, and those are theoretical frameworks that people are using, right? So if you look globally, there's this adage, and I don't know how much is true, but there's this global adage if you go to the UN and WTO and all of those processes that says America innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. So if you look at the EU, a lot of regulation comes out. It's called the Brussels effect, right? But you can look at even the latest, the EU AI Act, which is the first kind of legislation that tries to address this very, very complex issue of AI. And they've taken a risk-based approach to say some things we will not use AI. So we'll not use AI for medical devices, for example, or for kind of citizens that may be against citizens' interest. We may use it for fluffy toys, things like that. So they've taken a risk-based approach to regulation. And what we need to start thinking about, as my colleague says, is to be flexible in policy making, have the evidence-based, but kind of infuse it with more emerging theoretical frameworks around regulation. I'm going to stop there and play catch up with the rest of the questions as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay. You touched on a very important one. AI regulation, AI policy. Where are we as a continent? Where are we as a country? But this is all what we'll look forward to unpack as the session goes forward. Right now, I would like to revert back to Mr. Loiso, and I would like to just draw on your experience, your ICT SMME experience particularly, like from the perspective of ICT SMMEs. What do you think are the most significant ways in which the current internet governance policies can either enable or hinder their growth and their participation in the digital economy? And if you could provide examples as well.
No, thank you. Does this work now? Yes. So I think, and I'm not buying Zedna's face. So I think the first thing from a policy formulation part is really taking a multi-stakeholder approach, and a real one, not the fake one that sometimes we do that we're talking about, where stakeholders within that environment are properly engaged. But I think even with the good work that Zedna has done, that's why I'm here. Zedna does try and bring all the stakeholders. But I think even Zedna, we're not going far enough. For instance, have we engaged people in the rural areas, tribal authorities? Those are people who should have a stake in this, because those are some of our most marginalized communities. I think we can take it a step further in townships. Yes, some of us come from townships, but we no longer live there. We live in Sentinel in Midrand. And we might have, at this time, we might have some sort of a gap from what really happens there. Are those who continue to live in townships and farms, are they involved in the policy making? Do they know what's going on? So I think at that level, I think there's still a lot that needs to be done in bringing. So from an SMME perspective, in terms of the formal organized SMMEs, and I think ZEDNA and the rest of the DCTT community has really involved SMMEs in terms of the policy formation. But what really happens though is that yes, you'll be there when the policy is informed. When it comes to the other side where it has to be implemented and benefited, we see the very same leaders within there. Now, I don't want to mention them by name for preservations of certain things, is that they will then be running away and doing something else. So there is no real institutionalized feedback mechanism, which I think is a big gap. That when SMMEs, when these different stakeholders are experiencing something different from what was envisaged, that feedback really comes in and continue to impact how the policy is implemented. So I think hence my focus is on really applying a systems approach to both policy formulation, implementation, feedback, and monitoring. And that's where, for me, I think even with SMMEs, and Luvo sitting here would know this, in that even when we come to events, ZEDNA is different in this. Even when we go to events, you will see government will say SMMEs are the cornerstone of the economy, But when the president calls for, I'm glad you are here, Mr. Ned. When the president calls for advisors on economic issues, there are no SMMEs there. They call Vodacom, they call things with people who have never started a business, who have never had a startup, and they are advising our government on how to implement SMME development issues. You know, so that's really where thing is. We don't look at it in terms of the entire system to see how it ends. We say one thing at the beginning and we tend to do it right at the beginning, and then towards implementation, it then fades off. So I think the gap from an SMME perspective, the policies say the correct things, but when it comes to the people we appoint, when it comes to the advisors we appoint, when it comes to the boards that are being appointed to now start implementing this thing, SMMEs are nowhere to be found. And multinational companies tend to now have the main seat on the table. SMMEs are relegated to the back of the table. And obviously those institutions go there and do what benefits them. And in the end, SMMEs are nowhere to be found. Similarly with the communities that I was talking about being rural areas or township things, when the implementation or benefits need to now come, they are no longer on the table. The people are on the table at the other ones. So I think for me, that's the very a big gap. We just need to make sure there is that consistency even in the feedback, even in the where those multi-stakeholder forums continue to be involved, they continue to give feedback. That feedback continues to affect how we continue to implement these policy objectives. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Loiso. I think we've all had it. Meaningful inclusion of SMMEs in all of these processes is key, and it's very, very important. Now, my next question is for Mr. Nene, and we've spoken a lot about the issues around implementation. I just want to get your views now on what strategies or mechanisms are in place to monitor and evaluate the impact of internet governance policies and sort of adapt them based on practical experiences and feedback from stakeholders.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer now, except to say, even within the internet governance forum that we are in, let's ask the question, what are we doing and who are we doing this thing for? Because then it answers the next question which colleagues are raising. You know, the one thing that I've seen, and I've seen quite a bit in government. We tend to do things for ourselves. ZAIGF, you are too small to make a difference if you're not going to partner. FPB, everybody here, you can't do it on your own. So the question is, are we able to, now let's remove institutions. Let's talk about people who are employed in those institutions. Are we able to unbundle ourselves and say, you know what, I can do better if I were to multiply my skill set by ensuring that I invite more people who are going to do that? So the question would be, if we are here, there's only one entity in government that if anything were to go wrong, you have to ask that institution is GCIS. The single institution that must communicate policies, programs, progress in government is GCIS. Now, if GCIS is not here, how do we then work with them? Because then it answers the question, are we really understanding, colleagues, that we are talking about South Africans? So in the presidency, there's something that we call GSM. It's a government segmentation model. It tells us every day that we've got about 36 million South Africans who are underserved and underserviced. Because there's also an assumption that if we go to the media, someone is going to be able to tell that story. It's not true, because you are never going to find, sorry to use some of the mainstream titles in far-flung areas because of many reasons. So the question really that you should be as a takeaway from this thing, our next 10 years, our next immediate task is how do we then, one, create meaningful participation from a policy creation perspective, but from an implementation perspective. Forget about the intentions. I've done so many policies in my life, regulations. It's not about the intention. It's about people's lived experiences with that internet policy, or at least internet government policies. So if we're able to go back, colleagues, to the drawing board, and I take advice, because one of the complex issues that we are always confronted with is exactly that, is that do you unbundle or put obligations to companies that are well established and offer them obligations to run and make sure that they provide a space for SMMEs, or you do take a risk with SMMEs? Some countries have said, look, SMMEs, because globally it is accepted, that's where you create jobs and all of that. But I think it's the questions to the problems should come from us. Are we willing to take an internet governance forum to that township, to that informal settlement? Because we want to do two things: create awareness, make sure there's participation so that people are able to, or at least we increase the uptake for people to take up these things. Otherwise, we are going to, colleagues, we are going to blame policies. Now, there's a forum that the president keeps saying that he was once invited into a session. And in that discussion, people spoke, and they said, no, we are waiting for South Africa to create policy and regulations. But in the meantime, we are implementing. So when you analyze the statement, we are known for coming up with glorified policies. Even our constitution is glorified. But has it been tested to that level where people can assert that actually we have the best policies through their lived experiences? And that's the only form of M&E that you are going to get. How people are going to evaluate you is on the basis of their lived experiences. So it's a very difficult one. Let me just finally then give you the set. So we have the National Development Plan. We have the Medium-Term Development Program. We have the national programs. Provinces have the same thing. Local government in their different spheres have. There's something called one plan. I'm not too sure if colleagues have read one plan. The metros have their own development. At what point are we going to say collapse all of these things, colleagues? What should be the single focus for South Africa and for South Africans instead of doing these plans? Because what they lead to is the issue where we become so preoccupied about the space being run by me, or my entity. Until we get that right, colleagues, that's where we are going to be fine. Because I think that's our MNE. Our MNE is for us to go outside and somebody is able to say, actually, when we are talking about South Africa hosting the G20, a person walking on the street can tell you what is the economic diplomacy aspect of South Africa's hosting of that. What is the aspect, or at least the one final thing that they would want and they are expecting out of the Internet Governance Forum? It shouldn't be us who know that, because we're not the intended beneficiaries of that anyway. It's those South Africans. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your answer. I love how you speak to inclusion of ordinary South Africans, inclusion of the lived reality of ordinary South Africans. Like my next question, it ties well into my next question to Mr. Tabi. So just to considering the theme of our session on bridging policy and practice, I really just want to understand what innovative strategies or collaborative approaches that USASA is employing to ensure that the lived realities and the needs of the marginalized population in South Africa are better reflected in the formulation and implementation of policies on universal access and universal service as well.
Yep. Thanks for the question. Well, when you talk about bridging the gap and also addressing, particularly the question that you're raising, some of the challenges that we need to address, there's many, but if I can just mention maybe one or two, is on the issue of affordability. South Africans spend 5.3% of their monthly income on 1 gig of mobile data. And this exceeds the UN Broadband Commission's target of less than 2%. The other statistic worth mentioning is the challenge of the gender gap that we experience in the country, whereby only about 30% of women in rural areas, they report basic digital access skills. Now, to address some of these issues related to gender gap, to affordability, and so on, there's another challenge that compounds this issue is that of the fragmented policy implementation, which the fellow panelists here have touched on, whereby even within the DCDT portfolio, you still find that those interventions where we sometimes go in silos, whereas we trying to address the same or similar issues. So what we are doing now, to maybe come to your question, we are now taking the approach where we're going beyond policy or regulatory compliance, and we addressing tangible and specific issues. You might also recall recently the minister's announcement, whereby between the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies and the Minister of Finance, an agreement was reached whereby the smart devices or smartphones that are below 2,500 will no longer be subjected to that tax called ad valorem, or luxury tax on luxury goods. So that is one of the attempts also that has also been spearheaded by us in the background, working with the department to make sure that we address the issue of affordability. But secondly, there's also the issue of being systematic, clinical, and also transparent about how we identify and address the underserviced areas. Now, that process has been a bit vague at times and inconsistent, and the systems that we're putting in place now, with the announcements that they will be coming in due course, we addressing just that to make sure that there's certainty not only to the regulated stakeholders, but even to the communities, to the society, and even our fellow government agencies that we work with on addressing some of these challenges. And lastly, we also, if you look at what the DTIC is doing with the Transformation Fund, we've got a similar approach that we are considering that we are at advanced stages of whereby the issue of the Universal Service Fund management, the implementation thereof, we're making that also a transparent and also a process where it's not a black hole. If maybe one were to apply for funding there, you would have to, after applying, sit and wait and hope that maybe you will get a response or even the criteria that you have to follow, the requirements for that, all those things. We're making, streamlining all those processes and making sure that at the end of the day, when, you need to hold us accountable, it will be, a very objective and a very, above board process, no, depending on, different persons' perspectives. So these are some of the issues that we are putting in place. And I can assure you, in due course, a lot of things or the way things have been done with the agencies such as ourselves, it will be very, multi-stakeholder centric and very, consultative in terms of how we achieve, on implementation of our mandate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Tapiso. I think it's very important. You speak on transparency, you speak on multi-stakeholderism, which are very important in ensuring connectivity and bridging the digital connectivity gap in South Africa. My next question is to Dr. Q, and this is regarding AI policy, which I think is quite topical these days, and we've seen globally and in the African region as well. Countries have been taking steps to put together strategies, policies for artificial intelligence to make sure that they are able to reap the opportunities, but also are quite able to mitigate the risks that are associated with them. I just want to find out from your perspective, and if you could share with us and the audience, how do you assess the development of AI policy frameworks, especially within the African continent, in comparison to more established frameworks? You touched on the EU AI Act. And what would you say are the critical considerations for ensuring that all of these AI policies in Africa are contextually relevant and they address Africa's unique developmental needs and priorities, rather than simply mirroring all the other global approaches in AI regulation and policy that we're seeing emerging?
Okay. Whenever a panelist says thanks for the question, that means he's quickly thinking that question. So in the AI space, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, right? And I want to go back to this concept of multilateralism and multi-stakeholder. And just to say the multi-stakeholder and the multilateral process is a basis from which we do policy making, and I understand that. But there's a caveat and there's a scenario where we need to be a bit careful around that. And that is, and I'll probably, by illustration, will probably work better. But the market capitalization of Apple is bigger than most countries, right? It's bigger than Argentina, it's bigger than Germany. And there's a set of stocks that if you have to play in a stock exchange, there's a set of tech stocks that you have to buy, right? They call the Magnificent Seven. So it's Meta, it's Facebook, it's Tesla, it's Nvidia, ASML. You got to hold those stocks. Those are the Magnificent Seven stocks. They probably crashed a little bit now because of the tariffs and all of that, but generally those are the stocks you have. But the owners of those stocks, right? The CEOs of those companies are policymakers, right? They lobby, they influence, and they are able to create global frameworks. So if you look at sit again at the UN, you'll see there's a whole bunch of people in the back from the private sector, and every now and then they get a chance to talk. But I mean, those global frameworks are, are multilateral in nature. So the multi-stakeholders are involved. So we need to be careful about lobbying, about big tech and the intersection between big tech and diplomacy, right? Digital diplomacy, for lack of a better word. And while it's not as explicit as in the US, where you get paid to lobby, right? Lobbying is still a very important thing that happens, right? So if a cloud provider who shall remain unnamed moves to the country and waves around, I'm investing 10 billion rand into South Africa, the ability for that organization to influence policy increases, right? So then to look at technology historically, Africa have been users of technology, right? We talk about leapfrogging and you talk about all those kinds of theoretical frameworks. That's great, right? And to some extent, we look at the mobile industry, we did manage to leapfrog, which is probably why the mobile phone is a computer, is the equivalent of the computer in Africa. But when it comes to technology, we consume innovation, right, in Africa. And with AI, if you look at the chip manufacturing, it occurs in companies like TSMC and companies in the US and companies in Europe, which influences AI, and organizations like a company like DeepSeek. That's why when DeepSeek comes out with a new AI large language model, it makes such a big impact because it's an outlier almost, right? So we are now consumers of AI. We have these big tech companies who are going to influence policy. So we need to be careful then how Africa's considerations when it comes to developing regional frameworks around AI becomes more important. So to answer your question, it's a very difficult question to answer because it's very emergent, right? But the African Union has started looking at it. You can see some stuff emerging from SADC. There's a whole lot of historical processes. Again, Thabiso will be able to talk about harmonization of policy across Africa. So harmonization is what the whole HIPAA project is, right? So harmonization is an important thing, and understanding how the RECs, there's about 8 RECs in Africa, how they are going to interact first within themselves and amongst themselves. So I think that's going to be important in the AI domain. Difficult question to answer, except that we need some collaboration. We need to be careful of the multi-stakeholder effects, unintended effects when we are making this policy, but we really need to start thinking about, and it's hard to say to start bringing the innovation here, but we really need to start to think about how, as consumers of that innovation, we are slightly more creative around and protecting our citizens. So I think I'll have to stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirill. You touched on very, again, important conversations on the harmonization of policies. And I think the need for Africa, especially with emerging technologies, to be able to speak as one and not just as consumers, but also as creators of these AI technologies. Thank you so much to all of my panelists for such a packed discussion. And right now, just before I open the floor to the audience for questions, I would just like just one very brief sentence from each of the panelists, just as to going forward from here, how do we walk the talk? If you could just name one crucial action that you think needs to be prioritized more in order to effectively bridge this gap we see between policy formulation and its practical implementation. Just very briefly before we open the floor for questions. We could start with Mr. Loyiso. You could start.
Am I visible? So I think if there's one thing for me is to what we call moving away from consultation to co-governance, where the bodies and you spoke about this in terms of who are the users of this policy are going to be, and we must co-govern with them. To a certain extent, I've already said that ZNA does this well to a certain extent, but I think it can go deeper. But I think even in the decision-making process, co-governance does not talk about just you go and you consult and you fill a hall and people come in. So co-governance talks about from that process, the implementation and monitoring, and also the feedback mechanism. DCTT as an environment does it well when SMMEs are concerned, because we have a member in each and almost every board within the DCTT this CDT landscape. But I think it needs to go further than that in terms of going into the other marginalized communities. And for me, if we can get that right and really be pragmatic in the way that we do the implementation, so that we take the feedback and we become agile in terms of implementing. If something doesn't work, it doesn't work. We need to change it as we go forward, and we need to institutionalize that feedback mechanism within our policy frameworks so that we can be quick enough to make sure things work. And I think for me, that's the very same way. ZNA is not too far, and I think it simply just needs to involve the other stakeholders that they did not. I do know there's a lot of contestation within the already existing stakeholders. There are those that are anti-transformation, that do not want to see other stakeholders getting involved in decision making. So I'd like to commend ZNA on that and to really say push ahead to make sure that you're more inclusive and you bring more inclusive, not just when you formulate, but even in the decision making process. I think you're doing well enough than other government entities and regulators, but I think you can go further.
Thank you so much, Mr. Loyiso. And now we'll hear from Mr. Sandile.
Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for the panel. I'd like to invite the panelists to please stay up on the stage. We do have a scheduled question and answer session. And I think because a number of topic points were touched, and then we had a rollover of questions from the previous panel, if those members could also stay alert in case any questions come in directly for them. We do have a roving mic, so if that one could please make its way around the room. If you'll raise your hand with a question, then we can get the mic over to you. We have one in front.
I think the question is for Dr. Kiru, because you touched on it a little bit. I'm gonna look at, you talked about policy formulation and regulatory formulations. I want to find out, when are they binding, especially for South Africa? And I think the topic said internet governance for all, closing the gap. If you look at it from a global perspective, how do we get South Africans to participate in the policy formulations at a global level?
So if you look at global policy making, right? Let's just take the UN, for example. I think the process is well understood, right? How multi-stakeholders get involved, when they get involved, and when the multilateral part comes in, when it becomes binding, right? But I think how you implement that, how you practically talk to getting people involved from the ground up, and I know it's a lot of cliches when we answer these questions, that becomes difficult. So I know, so internet governance is, so I understand it, but it's very recently become under my mandate. We've been having some questions, for example, around provincial ZAIGFs, right? And when does that become necessary and how does that become practical? So I think practically how to bring it in is always a difficult process. It is difficult in an emerging digital space where there's a large number of our population. We have pockets of excellence, but we have a large number of digitally illiterate or less literate population. How to bring them into the policy-making space is, I don't know the answer, except we need to be creative around that. It needs to be some kind of community-based initiative. It needs to be cognizant of levels of digital literacy, of language issues, of historical disadvantages. All that needs to be taken. It's a very complex problem, but the process is well understood of how we aggregate that up into the global framework. When it becomes binding is when a global framework is legislated into local legislation, right? When we localize that legislation, then it becomes binding, practically. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but you can interrogate me more. I'm sure you will.
I think you're answering it, but if you can just continue on the binding part. When it's binding, let's say IGF is, policies are not binding. They're just discussions. None of those decisions means anything.
Yeah.
And most of the UN policies means nothing.
Yeah.
But most of the internet policies that are formulated in South Africa, that means a lot.
Yeah.
Who implements them and what do they mean? And how do we make sure that we have in South Africa, we can take it to global and represent it? Because what I know happens is that we go to IGF and we participate there where the Europeans have made policies and everything, and we lose this beautiful policies and information and knowledge that we have to filter it to the global.
So, I mean, one of the things about, between local legislation being aggregated up and vice versa is that it's not a one-for-one fit, right? Nothing's going to fit globally. So if you take, for example, the Rome Statute or the new Cyber Crimes Act, they are binding UN resolutions. They are binding frameworks, it'll be signed in Hanoi in a couple of months' time. It's then for us to take that legislation, go to the state law advisors, see if they conflict or anything else, and then we get them localized into local legislation, right? And that's when they become binding on us. Government has many arrows in its quiver, right? And legislation is one of them. You have strategies, you have policy documents, you have directives. There are many different ways to skin that particular cat, right? Yeah, that's about as much as I'm sure you will.
Can I just attempt the one on the UN aspect? I mean, I'm now abusing my position having worked in Parliament. I think one of the mistakes that we've often seen departments and entities do is that they'll go to an international event, see what they deem as things that could benefit South Africa, come back and it sit on the shelves of that department. So the proper structure is that you need to go to the two houses of Parliament for the ratification of those things. Go to NCOP and go to the National Assembly. Because once those are ratified, then it means it allows then the department to go and amend policies, because we are now saying you need to then respond to your international obligation, which you've ratified. So that's probably one of the issues that we've had with the what was this thing of the international property amendments of the department. Well, now they are called DTIC. They were DTI then. That part of the difficulty was that they've done everything possible except that they didn't go to Parliament as one of the aspects. The other element, colleagues, is that I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on laws, regulations. We forget sometimes that as Kira was saying, you see, part of the challenge is that you can have the best of intentions, but as it has been advocated elsewhere, trying to come up with the legislation, policy, and regulation is almost like baking pizza, and then you can come up with a cake ultimately. Because all the different stakeholder interests, some of them are going to take you to the direction you don't need. But because of how immense they are, how influential they are, you just need to be careful of those. So I thought maybe those are some of the elements that we need. Maybe what is lacking, which at the international level, is that we do have one of our finest blueprint, which is that 1996 protocol, SADC protocol on communications. You know about it, transport and all of that, which then requires South Africa to take a lead in harmonizing ICT on the continent, starting with the region. The question then we need to at least review and say how much of that responsibility we've taken in South Africa, so that maybe we can also then fine-tune our engagement at an international level, so that at least we are able then to take up that space, because we can't be a gateway to Africa for nothing. It means something. There's even a chapter in our NDP, the creation of a better Africa in the better world. It puts an obligation for us to lead that process on its own. Thanks.
Thanks. Just to add maybe on the comments by the fellow panelists, the process that, as I think Kira also mentioned, that it is also top-down and bottom-up. An example, maybe we can think of many of those global policies or legislations that have been domesticated in South Africa. An example being a GDPR that speaks to protection of personal data. And now we have the POPI legislation in South Africa. That is something that has been, a domestication of that lower policy. But then when you talk about the bottom-up approach, where also I think we have become very good at implementing in South Africa is when it comes to spectrum legislation, the radio spectrum policies, whereby the ITU every 4 years has what they call the World Radio Communications Conference, which takes place most of the time in Geneva. And in between the conferences, each country does its preparatory work. There are studies that are conducted by the different regions of the ITU. But also in South Africa, we have what you call the National Preparatory Working Group, which is coordinated by the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. And they sit, periodically to go through the inputs that will be made in the next conference. They also go through the agenda of the next conference, because by the time we go to the conference there's, I think that's the point that Kiru mentioned also, that you will find the multinationals, a lot of multinationals in there, but civil society is part of that to the extent that you have some academics, some researchers there, CSIR persons. But yes, it is also, I think, not an easy thing, to involve everyone there, but there is that process of getting that bottom-up consultation through a 4-year period up until we get to the conference. And when we make a submission as South Africa at the conference, it would have been, consulted broadly, on the ground. But yes, admitting that there will be a lot of, I would say, influence of a private sector there. Thank you.
Just one last point. In the 1980s, there was a good example of participatory budgeting. It came out from a place called Porto Alegre in Brazil, right? So you can read about it, and it's an example of how citizens start participating in the budgetary process. That whole process has been then captured in our IDPs. Our integrated development plan is, in theory, a participatory budgeting process that involves a community, right? And a very, very basic level, it means the community decides whether to build a road to the clinic or whether to fix the standing water near the school, right? I'm using an example here, right? So processes like that are important, where we understand them and we start not domesticating them into law, but importing them into our processes.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to our next question.
Thank you. My name is Tulofelo Mugoni. I'm the Internet Governance Coordinator for ZADNA. I wouldn't be a good SAYAS evangelist if I did not pose this question to our panelists, particularly to you, Sandile, because you're from presidency and this is where the function sits. But maybe my question is, in your opinion, what is the uptake, firstly, from a community perspective, multi-stakeholder perspective, and also from a government perspective? What, in your opinion, is the uptake of the SAYAS function in policy making? I know with certainty that governments are using it. How are communities, multi-stakeholders that are not obviously in government participating in it to inform government of their positions in policy making, as well as implementation, really, and how then maybe is government using it to track policy implementation?
So let me thank the question, because I've learned that you must thank the question first. I think, because I have to be very careful, because I'm still a salarized personal employee. You see, under normal circumstances, what we should then be getting, we should be asking ourselves. Let me give you a typical example. We're doing an APP, because all of us are aware of it. It should be that we go to a room, and in that room, we've got absolutely no framework in mind. The only thing that we have in mind is what problems are we seeking to solve? And this is the societal problem. And then our response should be, we are using our APP to address that societal problem. But what has happened is that we are using, whether it's the DPME, it's the National Treasury Framework, to be a compliant exercise against which we want to measure how are we dealing with societal problems. Now, let's talk about public participation because it happens. So you have parliament that is part of its function should be to deal with civic society and civic education, including participation. Each government department and by extension entities is required to do that. And we need to be able to then invoke that provision for people to even tell us the things that we don't like. Then the question is, in reality, because you're asking us, in reality, does that happen? I don't know to what extent the answer to that question. But here's the other complexity that we have. Let's look at the internet governance and look at ICTs. ICTs are now competing with colleagues that are looking at how do I spend my last 350 rand. ICTs are having to compete with even the fiscal framework of the country that says, do I connect the school, or at least I construct a clinic or a bridge because I still have learners that are still battling to cross over to attend the school. And so what you get is that you get what you have. So you'll have three kinds of societal, I'll say constituencies. Those who are going to shout the loudest and then agree with us. And then the others are going to be put on the periphery because they are saying the things that we should be doing, but actually we don't have the will to do it. And then, of course, the funny part is that even the colleagues who have come from society constituencies, including SMMEs, once they enter the corridors of government, they start changing. That's the reality. You can take the best advocate, the proponent of civil society. When they go, I don't know what happens, but when they go, they start looking at the obligation I have to report back. Let's give an example. 2026 is coming. Councillors, there's that requirement for councillors to report and to update their constituencies on each and every program, activities, policies, in their cases, bylaws. Instead of, because remember the ticket would have been, I want to change the social fabric of where I come. You don't go there and say, but actually, I've picked up that there's a framework that we are using. So the next time we are going to be attended to would be in 2028. They don't do that. So what has become of government in some instances is the glorification of government institutions. So it's no longer us being accountable to those who are governing through their taxes, but it's about them glorifying us. Oh, you work for government, and that must be nice. You are not saying, actually, I'm your boss. You work for that government. How do I ensure that you do 1, 2, 3? Including those things. I mean, sometimes we talk about the fact that, oh, there are language barriers. Our constitution provides that when we go to a room, we either take one of two things or a combination of them. Oral submission, as well as written submission. To that point, to say, let's assess that, Gogo, what are the priority areas? Because Magoko would have been saying, much as you're not going to cover these things, but I would want it to be covered so that my kids or my grandkids don't have to struggle. So I think the short answer is that there are institutions that consider civil society and their input, But there are those that have considered civil society as part of what we call malicious compliance. I have stakeholders. I can give you a database of the people I work with, but in actual fact, we are not considering the things that they're telling you, including when they review it. I wanted to make an example, but I feel the institution that could be offended. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that response. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Okay, with that, we'll close this panel. Thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you to the moderator online. Yeah, okay. Thank you to our panelists. So we're now going to move on to our next session, which is quite exciting and interesting. I think a very relevant conversation that we're going to have on digital equity and closing the gap. For this panel, we're going to have Mrs. Refulo Sekgopa, who will be the panel moderator. I invite her to come up to the stage, and accommodating her on the panel are going to be Dr. Simphiwe Buthelezi, Mr. Thando Hlophe, Mr. Kopano Ramashala, Mr. Mondli Mungwe, and David Mopeng.
So what you
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the last session, the graveyard. Okay, so, but I'm happy that we are all here, and I think this is going to be a very exciting discussion. The reason why it's going to be different is because I think through the day we've gone through basically the concept of digital equity. I think the panel discussions that we've had have already delved into the issues that I think we've faced as the country. My intention today was to start first with, I think, a theme of a song. The reason for that is because I would like everybody to just, come down and relax, and we can speak to ourselves, because the important issue we are facing today is about us as humans, and not the technology or the tool per se. So we need to internalize on who we are. And while we do that, I'd like to request the DJ to sing us a song. Okay, so he says we don't have that. So I think that's a song that reflects who we are as South Africans. I think we can all relate on identifying ourselves as a diverse nation with different needs and different demographics, different locations. South Africa is a country that is rich with resources, that is rich with skills, with national heritage that we need to understand how we can best incorporate that into information, into the ecosystem of learning, into also the economic space, because most of our national heritage artifacts and other, I think, historical information or history that we have is encroached in the indigenous knowledge systems. And those are not yet, I think, explored in deeper meaning. So in this context, when we say how do we then as a nation find ourselves being inclusive, being recognized from where we are as different people, speaking different languages, those languages that can be incorporated into this technology, that language that can be incorporated into these learning programs, so that we can be comfortable and we can be confident when we do engage ourselves with technology, because the biggest barrier would also be language. I think from our perspective, we speak native, or we've had a history of speaking native languages, and that's what we are most comfortable about in terms of using language to express ourselves, as opposed to English as a coded language. So I hope that from that perspective, we can introduce our panel members, and maybe from them, I would like to also find out, before we introduce our panel members, I would like to find out if Tulu has incorporated 2 other members that should be on the panel that will be joining us online. We have one. Okay.
Yes. Hello, everybody. This is David. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me.
Is that David? Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us. David, looking.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We were just going to wait for you. While we were waiting, we're going to be singing a song by Thandiswa Mazwai. Thandiswa would also remind us that what we should do is reflect on who we are. You know, we mustn't forget where we are coming from. We mustn't forget the main reason why we are gathered here. We gathered here to assist ourselves in the process of healing and the process of basically transformation. We are trying to assist our lives, looking into where we are coming from historically and the injustice and inequality that we've experienced in the past. So for us, we would like to find out from you, what does equity mean in this South African context? And how wide is this digital divide that we're experiencing? And just that framework for you to explain as well, how do you view the digital inequalities in South Africa, and how do they shape today's digital access and inclusion in our landscape? Mr. David, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please also give us a background of what you do as well. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Madam Moderator. As introduced, my name is David Moepeng. I am the lead coordinator of an organization called the African Cyber Smart Network. This is an organization that brings together organizations across the African continent, has members in different countries who have similar interest in terms of advancing and empowering African societies through digital transformation. I think it's out of a realization that often when we talk digital transformation, we forget that this is about people. We tend to focus mostly on technology. So what we do at the African Cyber Smart Network is really to make sure that we capacitate ourselves with the knowledge, the understanding of the factors, particularly those that relate to, human social well-being, and also those that impact on societal well-being, and ways through which we can devise interventions to address, the risks, the dangers, the threats that come with, digitalization that is not meaningful, that is not designed to empower people. So that's what we do, particularly issues around online safety and cybersecurity. So we have member organizations in South Africa, in Namibia, in Botswana, in different countries that we're constantly working to train and empower so that they can be able to undertake comprehensive, evidence-based, impactful digital transformation and advocacy programs in their communities or for the communities which they serve. Now, back to your question, you asked about digital equity and what it means in the South African context. I think when we look at digital equity in South Africa, okay, firstly, obviously to unpack it, digital equity, what it is, and so that we are all on the same page. It really refers to, fair and inclusive access to digital tools, including affordability, including skills as well as opportunities for all citizens, ensuring that all citizens have equal opportunities, are empowered and equipped equally for them to be able to use digital technologies meaningfully, regardless of geographic locations, socioeconomic status, race, gender, or disability. We want everybody to be able to have the same opportunities, the same skills, the same capabilities, the same abilities for them to be able to use digital technologies. This is because this is in the digital era, this is the one key driver of social and economic advancement. Therefore, we don't want others to be left behind on the basis that they are economically disadvantaged. So digital equity really refers to making sure that everybody has equal accesses. In South Africa, the digital divide remains significant, remains high. Urban areas enjoy better infrastructure and connectivity, while rural and peri-urban communities often lack reliable access. And this divide is also or further widened by disparities in economic status, like affordability. People being able to afford whether it's computers, whether it's mobile devices that they can use to access the internet. It's also widened by disparities in digital literacy. We still have communities that are digitally illiterate, and therefore there's a need for them to be empowered and have an understanding of how they can use these tools meaningfully. I think in most of our communities, really, when you look at most users, particularly in whether it's rural communities and townships, you find that even those that have access to these tools do not have full understanding of the opportunities that they have, of the power that they have on their palms. I've read reports that say a majority of us get excited when the new iPhone comes out. You want to have the latest iPhone, but the majority of us are only using 2% of these phones. We're not even using these tools at full capacity, and that is an indication of lack of understanding, lack of awareness of the things that one can do with these tools. We know that unemployment is a serious problem in South Africa and the rest of the African continent, particularly youth unemployment. And yet we know that they are, employment opportunities, online. There are, particularly when it comes to self-employment, there are so many opportunities that are available, entrepreneurship opportunities that are available. all that is required is people to be empowered and capacitated and given the tools and showed the direction through which they must follow for them to be able to use these tools meaningfully. We do have issues around language as well. The fact that we have diverse languages, and most of the time you'd find that online, most of the content is in English. So that means people who are not fluent in English are excluded. And so that's one of the issues really that is important that we must look at when we discuss digital equity. Historically, we have issues that we cannot overlook. Apartheid era spatial and economic planning that we know created deep-rooted disparities in our infrastructure and resource allocation. Many historically disadvantaged communities still face inadequate telecommunications infrastructure. That we still have under-resourced schools. We have just poor economic opportunities. Some communities don't have economic opportunities that other communities have on the basis of apartheid era economic planning and policies. And these legacies really mean that many, particularly Black South Africans, especially in rural areas and townships, are disproportionately affected by limited digital access, perpetuating cycles of exclusion and poverty. So, those are some of the issues that I can highlight at the moment. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Siyabonga Baba, thank you so much for that contribution. As we did say that the disparities in South Africa are quite great. So there's different levels of financial and resource inclusivity. And we find that technology as a tool is a resource that we can put into play, but without infrastructure, there's really not much we can do. We find that we are happy to hear that actually that the regulation has approved the smartphones not to be taxed at a rate that people that are basically needing access to internet can be able to afford a smartphone, because a smartphone is the means to get into the internet and give you at least that level of knowledge, access, and yes. So I would like to ask Mr. Kopano, if you can please introduce yourself and make us understand in terms of what your role is in the ecosystem with regards to infrastructure, access, penetration, and availability and deployment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Refilwe, and welcome to everybody that's still around for the graveyard shift. My name is Kopano Ramashala. I'm the founder and managing director at Bakwena Telecommunications. The core of our business is we're an internet service provider, providing internet to townships and rural communities. So one of the fundamental stumbling blocks of having affordable internet to the people is infrastructure. First things first, there is not enough infrastructure pouring into the more disadvantaged areas, namely the rural communities. For example, there's a project that we want to undergo with a nonprofit here in KZN. Getting infrastructure or getting what we call backhaul, which is basically internet to that community, comes at a very high cost, meaning the end user will also in turn have to purchase it at a very high cost. Otherwise, having that network will be unsustainable. Whether or not it's a private-owned network or a community-based network, it will simply be non-sustainable. So what we need is better tools and use of the current infrastructure and also expanding it. There was SOEs. Now I'm talking about other things, SEOs. There's SOEs like your Telkom, which is now OpenServe. they had POPs and infrastructure countrywide, even in the most dodgiest of corners. But some of that infrastructure has been left to be dilapidated and no longer works. And even now, when you want to go to, for example, Jozini, there was a POP that was active there. We were using telephone lines. We were all using telephone lines, meaning that infrastructure was there. But because it was no longer well maintained like it was before, it's been left and it's now redundant, basically. So now that we're moving into a more digital era and we want to now connect people using the same infrastructure because it will be the cheapest option, we are unable to do so properly. So those are the stumbling blocks that we are facing. However, we still need to march forward. And in that, that's why we are partnering with various organizations. Even if there is expensive infrastructure or means to access that internet, there's funding models that we are also basically investigating and implementing. For example, if we have a Wi-Fi hotspot in a community, we get private companies to come and sponsor, do adverts on such a public hotspot that will aid in covering some of the high costs that we have there. And that will allow us to actually have, for example, a 5 Rand a day type of setup where a person can purchase a voucher, get their unlimited internet for 5 Rand a day, knowing that that 5 Rand will cover other costs instead of the high cost of the backhaul or equipment and so on and so forth.
Okay, and if I may just on that note, find out what are other, because I know there's innovative way of utilizing that aging infrastructure to be able to multitask it to give us local solutions. Would you think that the partnerships that you're creating, the technology that is available, do you think you can be able to replenish it, or do you think we need to replace it altogether so that we can be able to provide access?
Yes and no. I don't think we need to replace it. I think we need to add on to it. For example, although this company is European-based, there's a company that has technology which you can use old coaxial cables or the old copper cables to send gigabit speeds in any direction. So now everybody is saying fiber this, fiber that, and they're forgetting that there's infrastructure there. So this company has technology that can still use the same infrastructure to get and achieve the same speeds. Now, when I say we also need to add technologies. For example, there's a South African company known as Pointing. They used to make a lot of wireless equipment. They've come up with something called a fiber point. Basically, it's a wireless hotspot that can be solar powered and deployed within hours. So I could get somewhere, drill a bracket, mount it, and it'll be up, provided there's internet connectivity. So if I have my old copper line that can give me a gig, I can connect it to that. It's solar powered. There's no need for power. There's no fights of load shedding or anything like that. It can cover 200-meter radius all around and give people the internet that they can use, they need and use. So yeah, that's.
And that's what is currently happening in KZN today.
Yes. Hello. So yes, we are on the ground implementing it. Obviously, there's various things that we are still jumping some loopholes, and that is basically when we have to now, get partners. But besides that, there's little stumbling blocks such as what was mentioned before. Councillors or some members of the community which are politically inclined forget who they are working for. So they become the inhibiting factors in us rolling out such things in some communities. You come, you speak to the people that are on the ground, they want it, they need it. And when you try communicating with those that lead them, they end up wanting other things first before you guys can roll things out. We don't mind giving them the shine. We don't mind. Like really, they can stand there and say, hey, it's fine. But we want to implement so our people can actually get this internet and also empower themselves with skills. If people like ourselves could do what we're doing today using the internet, and because we're in urban areas, we're able to actually get that information, what can someone to that has the biggest technology of Uglusi Nkomo? Like for me, that's something very profound. Somebody can be going and the cows know, no, this guy is calling me and it's coming back. That is technology beyond that, what we are talking about now. So imagine such a mind, if they can get access to other means, other technologies, other ideas, what can they do to support themselves, their community, and thus the entire nation?
Thank you so much for that contribution. I think we must endeavor to formalize these partnerships as a multi-stakeholder engagement, as well as triple P forms of participation in the solutions that we are bringing or providing to our communities. Thank you so much for the effort, and we really congratulate you in the endeavors that you're taking.
Thank you very much, Refina.
Okay, Mr. Kopano. I think as he is also inciting that there's more education that needs to be given to all the different parties and stakeholders, including the counselors, including the students, the whole community as a whole, so that we can understand the roles that we all play and the benefits that will come through, once we've done that. And because we are focusing more on what we are achieving instead of what we are recommending, we would like to understand more on what is it that we are busy doing currently, so that we can use innovation and education and skills to basically give people better understanding, and so that we can all understand why we basically need to have access to technology. Ma'am, if you may please introduce yourself and give us maybe that perspective. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
I think I just have a big voice. I don't think it's working. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Now it's working. Thank you for the opportunity to maybe share some of the experiences that we've seen and experienced in the province in terms of digital divide. But before I even talk about that, maybe I need to introduce myself again. My name is Dr. Simpiwe Buthelezi. I am executive for research and skills development. Okay, I was an executive for research and development. Now I'm an executive for innovation, technology, and skills development. So basically what we do within the Moses Kotane Institute, in terms of innovation and technology, we try and assist young people with digital skilling, because our research has indicated that there's a lot of inequality, not only in terms of digital skilling, but in terms of literacy. What we need to understand is that, today we're talking about having access to this, access to that, but we tend to forget that over 10% of our community is illiterate. To me, that's a starting point. If a person cannot read nor write, how do you expect the person to use the technology? Even if it's there, available, they won't be able to access it because they're oblivious to what is happening, since they can't read and they can't write. And we seem to be moving further and further in terms of technology, yet we are leaving a lot of people behind. So this is not only talking about digital literacy, just talking about literacy as a whole. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially amongst the adults, in terms of making sure that our people, especially Black people, are able to read and able to write. Because to me, that's a basic right. So moving along now to looking at digital divide, what is important or what we uncovered when we were conducting our research, we looked at digital divide amongst people with disabilities. For starters, people with disabilities in South Africa and anywhere in the world are marginalized. So you can imagine that those people actually need technology more than able-bodied people because they need assistive devices that they can't get access to. So this research was published in an international journal by our institute. I'm the author of it, of course, because we realized that there's still a lot of work that we need to do to actually get or to actually close the digital gap among people that are living with disabilities or people with disabilities, I'm sorry. And in that research, it highlighted that even the schools that these youngsters go to, they are not in a condition that is conducive for a person, for an example, who is using a wheelchair. Bathrooms are also not available. I mean, this is basic infrastructure that we're talking about. So I'm not talking about what the gentleman next to me is talking about in terms of old infrastructure, and also talking about the fact that even that infrastructure is not properly maintained. But we have a crisis in our country whereby we tend to forget about the marginalized and focus on those that have. And what you'll see happening moving forward is that the gap between the haves and have-nots will get wider and wider. And most of people in rural areas will be left behind in terms of being able to participate in the digital economy and also being able to participate in the digital space. That for me is something that maybe we talk about policies here, we talk about regulations, we talk about everything under the sun. But my biggest concern is it's all good and well to have policies and regulations. But if those policies and regulations are not properly implemented, then what's the point? We are just wasting our energy. Even by us sitting here, we are merely just utilizing oxygen and not really giving a back or making an impact in terms of the difference that we need to see in our communities happening. So to come up with a solution other than the digital skilling that we've done as the Institute, we've established digital centers. So we have about 14 digital centers in all the districts in KZN, whereby our people can have access to technology. People can have access to printers, they have access to 3D printers, and they are able to participate in this particular environment. The reason why these centers were developed was that we are trying by all means necessary to bridge that gap. So if you go to Mkuze, for an example, there's a digital center that is there. If you go to Edumbe, for an example, there's a digital center. Beckville, there's a digital center. I'm highlighting these ones because they are rural communities. So that's where we started with our plan as the Institute and as government, because Moses Kotane is under the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environment. So that's where we started, where we know that there is an urgent need for us to make a difference. One of the projects that we are embarking also on as the Institute to address this particular challenge is whereby now we are ascertaining how we can be inclusive in terms of making sure that these digital centers are also conducive for people that are living with disabilities. That is to actually just not say there's a problem, but we are coming up with practical solutions on how do we then move forward. And we've partnered with the likes of your Essentia, your Mintech and so forth, and many other different stakeholders to ensure that we roll out digital skilling and training in our rural areas so that we don't keep on singing the same song over and over again, and yet we are not doing anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and all the contribution. We acknowledge it. And we also look at the question of the resource centers or the digital centers that you've created. I hear you've got 14 of them in the different districts. But I just want to understand, before we move ahead, I just want to understand, are they open to different languages? Like, do you have linguistic sort of frameworks so that you can include, because we are now in KZN, and the most language that we've been able to communicate to our audience and our communities, the reason why we are here, we've been communicating in the language of SiZulu. So is that maybe an idea or a framework that you guys have implemented as a university, working with maybe your local kings and your local authorities?
Thank you for the question. In terms of the digital centers, the centers are open to everyone in the community, including schools. And these centers, you don't just go there and then you don't get assisted. Remember, some of the people that utilize the centers have never seen or used a laptop before or a computer before. So in each center, we have provided services of a supervisor and a person who will be responsible for training. So this is just to help everyone that walks into the center for them to understand, okay, this is how you get started. So in terms of the language, it's easier to communicate because all of the employees that we have in those digital centers are native Zulu speakers. So they are able to explain everything in the language that the community understands or the elderly understands, so that they are able to utilize the facilities.
Okay, thank you so much. That speaks to the external communication. Mr. Montley, if we may please ask you to come in there, because you are more on the data side of digital skilling, and you do apps and applications that assist. Is there maybe currently a project or endeavors that you are working on and to basically support inclusion? And also the fact that we've learned that in KZN, there are other schools that are also not offering mathematics or as a subject. And considering that, in this space, there's apparently in South Africa 464 schools that are not offering mathematics. So here in KZN is also the issue of literacy is still a key skilling issue. How are you addressing that as a contributor? Please introduce yourself, and then you can be able to take us through your work. Thank you.
Right. Afternoon to everyone. My name is Monji Mungwe, an executive member at Internet Society, as well as a deputy chairperson with the SIA Connector. So yeah, throughout the journey of addressing skills and data, been part and parcel of the open data Devon, which actually collects some of the important questions that people were asking about the living conditions, the skills, and also the, what are the basic things that people are, wanting in Devon. With those initiatives, we were able, to collect data that tells us how to, structure the needs in terms of what people are needing to be upskilled, or also the opportunities in terms of job seeking. And we've been working as well, with the chapter to address such issues, especially when it comes to doing encryption sessions. And currently, I think Dr. as well was talking about Mkuze. We have a remote hub that is currently going in conjunction to what we are doing here, addressing as well such issues in terms of digital divide, and also, knowing exactly who are the people that are not accessing, the internet as well. So in a nutshell, we've been, doing a lot of more of work concerning, surveys, and also working with counselors and working with entrepreneurs as well. And there are other stakeholders that we've been working with, such as school, to address the shortage of people who are not actually understanding what the technology that has been put out there is for. Yeah, so again, with the Internet Society and also SAYA Connector, we are actually addressing such issues based on the, the projects that we are doing, which is connecting the unconnected. So we'll be focusing more on Jozini and Mkuze with the district, actually to help entrepreneurs as well as community there to connect, because there's a number of them that are, traveling so far, like 80 kilometers sometimes, to actually access such, important, skill or tools. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. It sounds that there's quite a lot of interventions and activities that are happening around KZN already on its own. But I just want to find out, is there some sort of a metrics tool that is being used to measure the impact that, is being seen in KZN? Because really, since we've been here, we've heard beautiful stats that are spoken to say this and that is done, but we had an engagement with some of the students at UKZN that obviously feel that maybe with this conversation already as it is, there is really no inclusion on their part as students to be able to give their contributions. They reach into the local libraries. There's no resourcing. The existing digital skills that are there, there are requirements because people have got a fear of coming in and interacting, with this technology. So how do we see the impact and how do we measure the impact, Doctor, so that we can know whether we are making progress or how wide is this divide? Yes.
We are making progress. It's not all tall and gloom in terms of the activities that are happening in the province. But the issue at hand is that we are working in silo. So everybody is doing their own thing. I mean, the gentleman next to me just told us what it does. He just told us what it does. So everybody is doing their own little thing.
The Premier is also having a lot.
Yes. The Premier also, the Office of the Premier here in KZN is very big in terms of the rollout of broadband in the province. But because we are not really consolidating the efforts, then it seems as if there's not much that is happening. So no one has ever done any work in terms of the impact of all these interventions that government has rolled out with regards to trying to address the issue of digital divide. Maybe my colleague here, when we get to the office, we shall request that a research be commissioned. I'm being serious, a research be commissioned to actually look at all these interventions in the province and then ascertain what value and who has it benefited and at what extent has it benefited those people. If we are serious about service delivery, we need to be accountable in terms of the impact of the interventions that we roll out in our communities.
Thank you so much. And Mrs. Mokoni will definitely receiving that report. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I don't know, Mr. David, are you still with us? Is he there? Mr. Mope? Yes. Okay, great. Ke kopa go bolela Setswana ga ebe wa nkutlwisisa.
Thata. Mmereke bua Setswana.
No, go itumedisa rra. Ke kopa go botsisa ka taba ya gore in South Africa, the current digital policy and regulatory environment, is this conducive in closing the digital divide, like in terms of inclusivity and equity? And also, what are the lessons that can be learned from other African and global context in terms of promoting this digital equity? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I think in terms of policy, South Africa is not doing that bad. And and we're seeing significant progress in, state-led efforts to make sure that there is, meaningful digital transformation. Yes, we do have, policies that come about as a reaction to something, and where we are not proactive, and this is the same across Africa. And also because we are benchmarking, most of Africa, we are benchmarking with the developed world. The only challenge that we see is implementation, really. We need to get to a point where we need to realize that this is about people. Also, we need to get to a point where we are able to have clearly defined digital dividends. We are not just, rolling out digital technologies just for the sake of just, making sure that, yes, people do have access. But at the end of the day, it has to be meaningful. It has to be impactful. It has to lead to social and economic advancement. So we need to really start looking at those things. You did ask a question about whether there are metrics that can be used to measure the impact. And we need to broaden that, looking at not just, impact in terms of reach, because what I realized with most programs, when we talk impact, we talk reach. 1,000 people were reached, 1,000 girls participated in this program, or 1,000 students participated in this program. But in terms of impact on people's social economic status, on people's well-being, particularly when it comes to issues around online safety and cybersecurity, we're still lagging far behind in that aspect. So until we know that digital transformation is about people, is about meaningful impact, it's about advancing economic and social lives, we will have so many policies, we'll have so many programs, we'll have initiatives like my core panelist indicated that there's so many little initiatives taking place in different places in pockets, and the organizations, even state-owned enterprises, working a lot in silos. There's duplication of efforts, duplication of programs that is happening. I think we need to realize that there's a need to consolidate programs, to consolidate efforts for greater impact. People need to advance in digital economy, and for us to meaningfully benefit from digital technologies is when people themselves are empowered. I work mostly in areas around online safety, and I focus on user behaviors and habits and attitudes, and that's when we get to realize that the people are being left behind in digital transformation. We can talk access, we can talk connectivity, we can roll out to a point where in the middle of nowhere you can have Wi-Fi access, but as long as the people are not empowered, for them to be able to use those tools meaningfully and safely, we are not going nowhere. We are going nowhere, sorry.
Okay, thank you so much, Seth, for the contribution. And I think maybe from the floor, if there is a question, it's welcomed. Maybe you can have hands, 3 hands, 2 hands that can maybe be contributing or maybe seeking more clarity. From the floor, yes, thank you.
Do you have questions from the audience? We do have some questions from the audience, so perhaps we can take those. Pardon me, the online audience.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from online, which participation.
Hi, we're here from the Soweto Hub, and we've got 2 questions.
Initially to the remote hub in Soweto. who are actually being held by one of the multi-stakeholder members, Mr. Stembiso Xhaka. Over to you, sir.
Good evening. Good. So good day. How are you guys? Sorry about that. One thing that I wanted to just to add in terms of the community network all around, whether it's rural areas or in our local communities, is that we find so many community networks from different organizations, but they keep on failing because of not getting a lot of support from whether it's government or private sectors, you know, to sustain the network. So we also came up with a project that says Kasi Connecting, in terms of assisting spaza shops in giving them free Wi-Fi for people that are purchasing in their spaza shops. So we need assistance in terms of funding to make sure that the SIA Connector network is out there, and also making sure that people are getting internet at a cheaper cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stembiso.
Hi, my name is Mukheto Patera, and I'm a representative from Kwakhaya Ndaba, Credo Multicultural Village. We do heritage and cultural activities. Currently, we are in the process of archiving and restoration, but we're not yet able to, you know, preserve, like capture and save some of the work that we're doing, the events that we're having, like streaming and stuff like that. We have programs there, but we do have data and net issues. So I just want to know and maybe request, we would like to have a hotspot for the community and to also help us run some of the things that we do there. So I just want to know what interventions are possible for community programs or community organizations. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Is there another question?
Yes, we do have some comments from the chat as well. At the remote hub, the airport, they've said yes. In fact, they've done some work with Moses Kodane. They commend the research that you'd like to undertake, and note that there's a huge gap in the rural community in the way of connectivity, which is actually what is influencing the digital literacy gap. And yeah, so there's a challenge there to the forum to create a greater sense of awareness about the ICT space. And then we further have a comment from Advocate Dennis Ramalapa, who says, natural language processing for language empowerment and preservation, NLP and small language models aren't mentioned anywhere, both in the AI strategy and the policy framework. Apologies, this is a comment from the previous panel. However, more comments go on about to say that infrastructure is definitely needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Mr. Kopano, please will you be able to respond to Mr. Kakaza on the community networks, and also add on to if there can be availability of, or what are the benefits of having hotspots in the current day, and if they are effective and inclusive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, to respond to Stembiso's comment, I think it was more of a comment than a question. Well, he obviously spoke about the funding issue. Yeah, which is the biggest elephant in the room. But there are means and ways to do it with certain agencies that are willing to assist. For example, one of the stakeholders here, Internet Society. there are grant programs that they release quarterly, if not biannually, that have a connected grant, which one can apply and start rolling out some networks. That's number one. And to answer Stembiso's question, number two, the lady who is representing the Credo Muta Foundation and the actual cultural center, as a person who does attend some of the events that are actually held there, it is something very sour and sore to see when you attend that, these people need connectivity to relay this message to others that are not here, that are present and able to come. One thing I did note is the issue of power in certain parts of the center, but with technology set that I did mention already that we can do solar power things, I think she can get into contact with me as to how we can get that place connected and up and running. I put my body on the line for that one.
Thank you so much. We are talking achieving digital equity. Thank you so much, Ntate Kopano. Siyabonga, Baba. And for my last question to the panelists, I think maybe for everybody to just respond in a one line or one sentence as to who should be held accountable for the inclusion and this closing the gap. I'd like every person to please respond to that in closing. Then we can then do the close. Thanks.
I think it's the simple one, moderator. We should all be responsible. It's everyone's responsibility. I mean, from what you've had from my colleague here is that sometimes even when you try to roll out these interventions in the community, you get a lot of bottlenecks, and also you get a lot of sabotage from the powers that be. So I don't think it's because they don't want to see the changes that are happening in the communities. I think they're just misinformed. And also there's lack of knowledge in terms of what this can do for the entire community and how it stands to benefit everyone. So what we need to advocate for is to ensure that our people are well informed about what is happening in this particular space, especially if we want to bridge the gap. I'm so glad that there was a comment that, of course, Moses Katane does have a digital center at Umkhuze. It means, moderator, I'm not lying. So I'm so glad that because Umkhuze is a rural area, so we are trying by all means to make sure that we address this digital gap, especially in rural areas. And I do believe that we'll succeed, and we'll succeed even more when we start doing impact assessments of some of these programs that we have rolled out, so to see who has benefited and how they've benefited and where they are now in terms of economic benefit and value. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well done. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I think the most important question that we should, especially for the community or the ecosystem of the internet itself and the developers, is to ask ourselves this question before we can develop, is that who is this for and who is left behind? Certainly when you look at, the devices that we use today, sometimes or certain days, people were not using smartphones. And when you wanted to connect with your mom and stuff, they needed to learn how to use a smartphone. So when we develop things, as we saw from the students here, we're developing some of the most innovative solutions. Who is this for and who's left behind? And also we need to be interested. We find that there's a challenge with people who, were not interested because there's a certain element of, attached to technology. And yeah, we've seen that even in the most, spaces, we find that there's a certain group, that is occupying that area, and there are other people who are not part of it because probably of the jargons or maybe not been simplified enough, that they can actually play a role as well in those areas. Yeah, so let's be interested and try to make sure that we answer the big questions as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, to answer the moderator's question, I still say, as my colleague here, Dr. Buthelezi, we are all accountable. There's no way that we can run away from that. We need to do our best, even if it's spending your last buck, because at the end of the day, if you don't spend your last buck to empower the person next to you, that person might be the person tomorrow that's going to snatch the phone out of your hand. Not because they want to, but because of circumstance. So I don't want to say it's fine for people to snatch phones out of people's hands, but we need to look at it from that perspective, that the ripple effect of one small thing that you're going to do, how is it going to affect the next person? I mean, teaching our parents to use smartphones has a huge ripple effect. I remember when I was a student, communicating with my parents was hard because I had to buy airtime. Now, WhatsApp, voice note, imagine there's internet at school. Tina, when we used to attend university, there was a computer lab there with 56K internet. And your parents didn't even know what email was, let alone you that's coming to attend. So the smallest of things can create a big impact. And I think it's up to us that are here in this room and those who are listening online and anyone beyond that we can reach to say, hey guys, let's do this. Just in closing, that question is a question that I asked myself a couple of months ago. And I started to say, okay, I've got a camera lying around here. Let me start filming myself and let me put content on YouTube about this information, about how to create your own hotspot, on what policy framework there is, what licensing you require, and so on and so forth. And it's quite amazing to see the response that I'm getting and questions and replying to them. And, it's quite nice because we can't all be fighting, as I said, in silos. If someone has information, at the least they can start, even if it's one hotspot nyana using their fiber internet, although it's not 100% legal, but it's something and we're getting somewhere. So yeah, that's it in closing.
Thank you. And the last speaker, David, do you have something to contribute in that regard?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. I think my core panelists have already, said it. It is everybody's responsibility. Digitalization as a process of societal transformation cannot be left to any single entity or discipline or domain. It can't be left to government alone. I know most of us often look to government to take responsibility, but looking at the fact that digitalization touches every aspect of society, therefore everybody, every entity, every institution, every community in our society needs to make sure that they play a role to ensure that we transform in a manner that will not impact negatively on our social well-being. I'll give you an example. Often when we look at technology, we think it's an IT issue. Even in organization, I'm a trainer and I provide training on cybersecurity for non-IT professionals. And what we focus on is user behaviors. And often when you engage with organizations or corporates, when you're talking cybersecurity training, they think, oh, that is just for guys in IT. And we tell them that no, everybody in your organization, from the cleaner to the security guard to the driver, uses technology. Therefore, you need to make sure that everybody in your organization is skilled, empowered, equipped with the knowledge they need for them to be able to use these tools meaningfully. And it is the same in our societies as well, in our communities as well. Everybody needs to make sure, everybody needs to be empowered for them to be able to use these tools in a manner that will advance communities, even at a household level. So I think we need to start looking at it from that perspective. But I implore on academia to really step up and drive knowledge generation because since this discussion started, we've had most of the speakers here talking about how often some of the things is due to lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, even at leadership level in government. Maybe people are not coming up with certain policies. The leaders are not coming up with certain policies on the basis of lack of knowledge, lack of awareness. So academia really needs to step up. We need to see our universities coming up with centers of excellence on issues around, digitalization, digital transformation, digital security, online safety, governance, all these issues really, internet governance rather, all these issues really, okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Yeah, that will enable us to achieve this digital equity. So thank you so much, David, for that contribution. My program manager is here on my side requesting that we should really wrap up the discussion. So in a nutshell, what the discussion from my side, how I've heard how things have come through is that by bridging this digital divide, we can be able to overcome the gaps in education and healthcare, economic opportunities, and social participation. So if we promote greater equality amongst each other as a nation, then we can achieve social justice. Thank you very much for the day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for your time and you sharing your insights. Michael, thank you. Right. We've actually come to the end of our program for today, and it has been a thrilling and engaging experience. I implore everyone to please stay with us, have lunch with us, network, and let's really take actionable steps into the conversations that we've had over the past 2 days and with the youth program. I am honored to invite our deputy chairperson onto the stage, who will actually be coming in to not only summarize and close off the program, but to provide some context and perspective from the multi-stakeholder committee. Mr. Luvo Gray.
Thank you very much, Togo. I've noticed that this mic has been quite biased to us, not vertically challenged. I think, partner, we must open our own support group for those who are not vertically challenged. Good afternoon, colleagues. As we close this year's South African Internet Governance Forum, allow me to provide a concise summary of the proceedings of the second day of the South African Internet Governance Forum. I think it has been a day that has deepened our reflections and has sharpened our strategic outlook on internet governance in relation to WSIS Plus 20. We opened with our first panel discussion on internet governance and the National Development Plan, where panelists unpacked how digital policy intersects with the broader socio-economic objectives, including education, healthcare, economic growth, and service delivery. The message was quite clear. Internet governance must be fully integrated into our national development vision, not treated as an isolated sector. Following a brief break, we returned to an impactful session on bridging policy and practice, where the various speakers in the panel addressed the persistent gap between high-level strategies and the realities on the ground. This conversation, for me, I think, stressed the importance of implementation. It was implementation, implementation, implementation. It also spoke to monitoring and also touched on the multi-stakeholder collaboration in translating policy into lived outcomes. Next, we hosted a panel on digital equity and closing the gap, where we discussed issues of infrastructure disparity, which is a session that we just concluded now. Rural access was a key topic, and also quite an important aspect, which is affordability. I think this was one of the most engaging sessions of the day, with civil society voices strongly emphasizing the need for targeted interventions in marginalized communities. Throughout the day, ladies and gentlemen, today's program, one consistent theme that I picked up was that we cannot wait to be included. We must organize, we must participate, and we must also lead, whether in shaping the global digital compact, asserting our position on WSIS +20, or driving national internet policy. South Africa must be loud, we must be united, and we must be grounded in principle. With that, I want to thank each and every one of our participants, our speakers, our organizers, and especially the youth delegates that have given this forum the spirit and the urgency it deserves. Let us not just leave here with notes, but let's leave here with mandates. The Internet Governance Forum must continue to be a platform of action and not just ideas. I thank you, and I officially close the 2025 South African Internet Governance Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that closing. I would like to invite everybody to please join us for lunch. We will have it downstairs where it was held yesterday as well. And the food is ready. So if we can make our way directly to the and around the corner to the lunch area. Thank you.